A man dumps his pregnant girlfriend for a rich woman. Years later, she returns as the billionaire he begs for help. The moment Peter Langston walked into the glass conference room on the 47th floor of the Apex Tower in Manhattan, his polished Oxford shoes clicking against Italian marble, he felt the air shift. Thick, electric, wrong. He'd been summoned here by his lawyer with words that had felt like a lifeline. There's interest. A major investor. This could save everything. Peter had nodded, straightened his tie, the Hermes one, the last remnant of better days, and told himself this was just another negotiation. He'd charmed his way through worse. But now, standing in the doorway of the conference room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a gray November skyline, Peter Langston froze. Because the woman sitting at the head of the table, flanked by 3 lawyers in charcoal suits and a security detail that looked like they'd stepped out of a Secret Service briefing, was the same woman he'd left crying on a snow-dusted Boston sidewalk 21 years ago. The same woman whose voicemails he deleted without listening. The same woman whose pregnancy test he'd seen on the bathroom counter before he packed his bags and disappeared into the arms and mansion of Meryl Streep. Angela. But not his Angela. Not the Angela who used to wear scrubs to their dates, whose laughter could fill a room, who dreamed about opening a clinic in Roxbury someday. This woman wore a tailored cream suit that probably cost more than his mortgage payment. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists that framed a face that had aged like fine wine. Sharper, more regal, untouchable. Diamond studs caught the light in her ears. Her posture radiated power, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. She looked up from the documents spread before her, and her eyes, those same warm brown eyes that used to look at him like he hung the moon, met his with the temperature of a corporate audit. "Mr. Langston," she said, her voice smooth as aged bourbon and just as dangerous. "Please have a seat." Peter's mouth went dry. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. The room tilted slightly, or maybe that was just him, unmoored from the reality he thought he understood 5 minutes ago. Angela. The name came out strangled, barely a whisper. One of the lawyers, a woman with silver hair and the expression of someone who'd seen empires rise and fall, glanced between them with barely concealed interest. The security personnel remained stone-faced, but Peter could feel their assessment, their judgment radiating off them like heat from asphalt in August. Angela tilted her head slightly, a ghost of something, amusement? Contempt? Flickering across her features before vanishing behind professional neutrality. "Dr. Angela Bassett," she corrected, her emphasis on the title deliberate as a scalpel. "CEO of Phoenix Global Holdings. Though I suppose we can dispense with formalities, can't we?" Peter. The way she said his name, like she was testing its weight, finding it wanting, made his knees weaken. He stumbled to the chair his lawyer had been gesturing toward frantically, collapsing into Italian leather that probably cost more than the used Honda he'd been driving since his assets were frozen. His lawyer, Martin Chun, cleared his throat. "Dr. Bassett, thank you for taking this meeting. As we discussed, Langston Enterprises is seeking a strategic partnership with Phoenix Global. The terms we've outlined are irrelevant," Angela interrupted smoothly, not even glancing at Martin. Her gaze remained locked on Peter, pinning him like a butterfly to a board. "Before we discuss business, I think Mr. Langston and I need to address some personal history. Don't we, Peter?" The room fell into a silence so complete Peter could hear his own pulse thundering in his ears. Outside the windows, the November sky had darkened, clouds rolling in like an omen. Somewhere far below, the city continued its relentless churn, oblivious to the reckoning unfolding in this sterile room with its modern art and recessed lighting. Peter's hands trembled in his lap. 21 years. 21 years since he'd made the choice that had seemed so obvious at the time. Survival, ambition, escape from a future that felt like a trap closing around his throat. He'd been 26, tending bar at a Back Bay hotel, watching rich men in suits order $30 cocktails without blinking, while his own bank account hovered perpetually near zero. When Angela had showed him that pregnancy test, her hands shaking with hope and terror, all he'd seen was the door to his dreams slamming shut. And when Meryl Streep, 52 years old with silver in her perfectly coiffed hair and a real estate empire that could buy and sell neighborhoods, had offered him a way out, had seen something in him, wanted him, promised him entry into a world he'd only glimpsed through hotel bar windows. He'd taken it. He'd taken it and never looked back. Except in the dark hours between 3 and 4 a.m., when sleep wouldn't come and guilt gnawed at him like a living thing. Except in the dreams where he heard a baby crying and woke up in cold sweats. Except every time he passed a pregnant woman on the street and wondered if somewhere his child. "I see you remember," Angela said softly, and something in her voice cut deeper than shouting ever could. "Good. That makes this easier." She stood then, moving with a grace that spoke of yoga classes and personal trainers and a life built brick by deliberate brick. She walked to the windows, her back to him, silhouetted against the darkening sky. When she spoke again, her voice carried across the room like a judge delivering a sentence. 21 years ago, you left me standing outside our apartment building with a positive pregnancy test and a letter you were too much of a coward to deliver in person." She didn't turn around. "Do you remember what that letter said, Peter?" His throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Martin was staring at him with dawning horror, finally understanding why this meeting felt less like a business negotiation and more like an execution. Angela turned, and her eyes were dry, hard as diamonds. "Let me refresh your memory. It said, I can't be a father. This life would ruin me. You'll figure it out, you always do." She paused, letting each word land like a blow. 14 words. That's all my life was worth to you. 14 words, and you were gone. What would you have done in Peter's position, faced with the consequences of a choice made decades ago? Drop your thoughts below. Peter wanted to run. Wanted to vanish through the floor, to unmake the last 21 years, to rewind to that moment and choose differently. But he was trapped in this chair, in this room, in the wreckage of his own making. "Angela, he started, but she held up one hand, silencing him with a gesture that spoke of boardrooms conquered and deals closed and power accumulated with the patience of someone who understood that revenge was a dish best served with compound interest. "You're here because Langston Enterprises is drowning," she said, returning to her seat with the deliberate calm of a chess master about to announce checkmate. 3 failed ventures in 5 years. Investors pulling out. Banks calling in loans. Your board is ready to vote you out. She smiled then, and it didn't reach her eyes. "You're here because someone told you Phoenix Global might be your last hope. That we have the capital, the connections, the power to pull you back from the edge." She leaned forward, fingers laced on the polished table, and Peter saw in that moment exactly how far she'd climbed, how completely she transformed herself from the nursing student who used to study by lamplight in their cramped studio apartment to this woman who could destroy him with a phone call. "You're here," Angela said quietly, "because 21 years ago, you taught me that the world belongs to people who take what they want and don't look back. You taught me that love is a luxury for people who can afford to be weak. You taught me that survival requires sacrifice." She paused, her next words dropping into the silence like stones into still water. "So I survived, Peter. I sacrificed. I took. And now." The sky outside had gone completely dark, the city lights below beginning to flicker to life like stars in an inverted universe. Thunder rumbled in the distance, or maybe that was just the blood roaring in Peter's ears. Angela's smile sharpened into something that might have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. "Now," she whispered, "you're going to learn exactly what that cost me. And what it's going to cost you." The silence in the conference room stretched like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Peter's mind raced backward through time, tumbling through memories he'd spent 2 decades trying to bury beneath expensive scotch and hollow achievements. Boston. Winter of 2004. He could still see it all with painful clarity. Before we get deep into today's story, I first of all want to apologize for not giving you awesome stories as usual for the past 3 days. I have been really sick, but my heart was still with you guys, my precious family. I'm not yet fully recovered though, but I still have to take out time to create this beautiful story specially for you. Please, wish me a quick recovery in the comment section, because when I'm fully recovered, I will have more strength to create more awesome stories for you. Lastly, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Once again, You're welcome to Mr. Paul Stories, where we weave our dreams and hearts together through the magic of stories. Now, let's begin today's story. 21 years earlier. The studio apartment in Alston had been barely 600 square feet, with radiators that clanked like prisoners rattling chains and windows that let in more cold than light. But Angela had made it feel like home. She'd hung fairy lights above the futon they'd bought at a yard sale, kept fresh flowers, daisies, because they were cheap, on the windowsill, and somehow always had something cooking on the two-burner stove that filled the space with warmth and promise. Peter had loved her then. Or at least, he'd loved the way she made him feel, like he was more than a bartender with a philosophy degree he couldn't use and student loans that multiplied like rabbits. Angela had been in her third year of nursing school at Northeastern, pulling night shifts at Mass General while carrying a full course load. She'd study at their kitchen table, really just a card table with a tablecloth, her textbooks spread around her like a fortress, her beautiful face illuminated by lamplight, and Peter would watch her from the futon and think, this woman is going to change the world. But he'd also think, and I'm going to be the guy who held her back. Angela's family, her mother who cleaned houses in Newton, her father who drove a bus for the MBTA, her 3 younger siblings crammed into a 2-bedroom in Dorchester, they looked at Peter with hope. Like he was the good thing that finally happened to their Angela. The white boy with a college degree who tended bar at the fancy Back Bay Hotel, who talked about starting his own business someday, who made their daughter laugh after 14-hour shifts. The weight of their hope had been crushing. And then came that December night. Angela had been acting strange for a week, quiet, distant, her hands trembling when she thought he wasn't looking. When she'd finally pulled out the pregnancy test from her nursing school backpack, setting it on the table between his beer and her anatomy textbook, Peter's entire world had tilted sideways. I'm pregnant, she'd said, and her voice had carried equal measures of terror and wonder. 8 weeks. I know we didn't plan this. I know we're not ready. But Peter. She'd reached across the table, taking his hand, her brown eyes swimming with tears. We could do this. My mom would help. We could. But Peter had already been doing the math. A baby meant no more dreams of business school. No more networking at the hotel bar with venture capitalists and hedge fund managers. No more nights imagining himself in those $1,000 suits, driving cars that cost more than his entire existence. A baby meant food stamps and WIC and a lifetime of scraping by, of becoming his own father, a good man who worked himself to death at a hardware store and died at 53 with nothing to show for it but a paid-off Corolla and a gravestone. I need time to think, he'd said, pulling his hand away. Angela's face had crumbled. How much time? He'd gone to work that night and poured drinks with shaking hands. And that's when Meryl Streep had walked into his life like a solution wearing Chanel No. 5. She'd been a regular at the hotel bar for months, always alone, always ordering a dry martini with 2 olives, always leaving $100 tips on $40 tabs. Peter had learned she was a widow, that she owned half the commercial real estate in the Seaport District, that she had a penthouse on Commonwealth Avenue with views of the Charles River. That night, she'd stayed until closing. When Peter had mentioned he was dealing with some personal issues, she'd listened with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in his life. What do you want, Peter? She'd asked, swirling her 3rd martini. Really want. Not what you think you should want or what other people expect. What keeps you up at night? More, he'd said honestly. I want more than this. I want to matter. I want to walk into a room and have people notice. I want, he'd stopped embarrassed. Money, Meryl had finished, and she'd smiled. You want what money gives you. Security. Power. Options. There's no shame in that, darling. The shame is in pretending you don't. She'd leaned forward, and he'd smelled her perfume, seen the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist that probably cost more than his yearly salary. I could give you that. I need someone young, ambitious, someone who understands that life is about taking what you want before it slips away. Someone who isn't afraid to make hard choices. Peter had understood what she was offering. Not just money, but transformation. An entirely new life. The next morning, he'd written the letter. 14 words. He'd left it on the kitchen table next to the pregnancy test, packed a single bag, and walked out while Angela was at her shift at the hospital. He'd told himself she'd be fine, that she was strong, resourceful, that she'd figure it out. That one day, she'd thank him for not dragging her down with his resentment and regret. He'd told himself a lot of lies in those early days. Present day. "You're wondering how I did it," Angela said, pulling Peter back to the present with the force of a riptide. She was still seated at the head of the table, but now she'd pulled out a tablet, her manicured fingers, nails painted a subtle rose gold, swiping across the screen with practiced ease. "You're sitting there trying to figure out how the nursing student you left behind became this." She turned the tablet toward him, and Peter's stomach dropped. The screen showed a timeline, a corporate history. Phoenix Global Holdings. Founded in 2012 as a medical consulting firm. Acquired its first tech startup in 2015. Expanded into biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and venture capital. Current valuation, $47 billion. At the bottom of the screen, a photo, Angela receiving an award from President Obama in 2016. Another, Angela on the cover of Forbes with the headline "The Phoenix Who Rose," how Dr. Angela Bassett built an empire from ashes. "I finished nursing school 8 months pregnant," Angela said, her voice carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every sacrifice. "Gave birth to our son, yes Peter, our son, 3 days before my final exams. Named him Elijah Langston Bassett, because I wanted him to carry his father's name even though his father was too much of a coward to carry him." Peter's vision blurred. A son. He had a son named Elijah. "My mother helped me with childcare while I worked night shifts in the ICU," Angela continued, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "I saved every penny. Lived in my parents' basement for 5 years. Ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to count. But I had something you never had, Peter." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made him want to crawl under the table. "I had purpose. I knew exactly what I was building and why." She stood again, walking around the table now, circling him like a prosecuting attorney approaching a hostile witness. "I got my master's in healthcare administration while working full-time. Started consulting on the side, helping hospitals optimize their operations, reduce costs, improve patient outcomes. I was good at it. Really good. By 2012, I had enough clients to start my own firm." Peter watched her move, mesmerized and terrified. This wasn't the soft-spoken woman who used to make him breakfast before his late shifts. This was someone entirely different, forged in fire he'd lit and walked away from. "The first 5 years were brutal," Angela said, stopping by the windows, her silhouette outlined against the Manhattan skyline. 90-hour weeks. Missing Elijah's soccer games and parent-teacher conferences. Eating lunch at my desk. Showering at the gym. But I learned something important. The world respects money more than kindness, power more than love, success more than integrity." She turned back to face him, and something flickered across her face. Pain maybe, or the ghost of who she used to be. "You taught me that, Peter. So I became the best student you never knew you had." Martin Chun shifted uncomfortably in his seat. One of the lawyers, a younger man with sharp features and sharper eyes, took notes on a legal pad with swift, efficient strokes. The silver-haired woman watched everything with the patient interest of someone who'd witnessed countless human dramas play out in rooms just like this. "By 2015, I'd saved enough to make my first acquisition, a struggling medical device startup in Cambridge," Angela continued, returning to her seat with the confidence of someone who owned not just the room but the entire building. "Turned it around in 18 months. Sold it for triple what I paid. Used those profits to buy into the tech sector. Then biotech. Then AI and machine learning. Each investment is bigger than the last. Each success builds on the previous one." She pulled up another image on the tablet, a photograph of a stunning modern building in what looked like Silicon Valley. Phoenix Global Holdings headquarters in San Jose. 3,000 employees. Offices in 12 countries. "We're working on cancer research, climate technology, and educational software for underserved communities." Her smile was razor-sharp. "Last year, we donated $200 million to fund college scholarships for single mothers pursuing STEM degrees. I wonder why I chose that particular demographic. If you had the power to rewrite one moment in your past, would you, or would you risk losing everything you became because of it? Share your thoughts. Peter felt like he was drowning, like the room was filling with water and his lungs couldn't find air. Every word Angela spoke was a nail in the coffin of his self-image. The story he'd told himself about being the one who got away, who made the smart choice, who chose ambition over sentiment. "Where's Elijah now?" he asked, his voice cracking on the name. Angela's expression hardened. "That's not your concern." "He's my son." "He's my son," Angela corrected, her voice like ice cracking underfoot. "You gave up the right to call him yours the moment you walked out that door. Elijah is 20 years old, brilliant, kind, everything you'll never be. He graduated from MIT last year with a degree in computer science. He's working in venture capital now, funding startups that actually change lives instead of just padding portfolios." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge that could cut diamonds. "He thinks his father died before he was born. I told him you were killed in a car accident when I was pregnant. I told him you were a good man who would have loved him. I lied, Peter, because the truth, that his father chose a penthouse and a trust fund over him, would have destroyed him." The words hit Peter like physical blows. His son thought he was dead. His son had grown up fatherless because Peter had chosen Merrill's marble floors and crystal chandeliers over diapers and daycare, business suits over baby clothes. "Does he?" Peter's throat closed. He tried again. "Does he know you're meeting with me?" "No," Angela said flatly. "And he won't. This is business, Peter. Just business. You're here because Langston Enterprises is imploding, and Phoenix Global has the power to either save it or let it die. I'm here because I make calculated decisions about investments based on potential returns and strategic advantage. Nothing more." But her hands, Peter noticed, were gripping the edge of the table just a little too tightly. Her jaw was set just a little too firm. She was a fortress, yes, but fortresses were built to protect something vulnerable inside. "Tell me about Merrill," Angela said suddenly, changing direction like a chess player revealing a gambit. "How did that work out for you? The rich widow who promised you the world." Peter flinched. The wound was still fresh, even though Merrill had been dead for 3 years. "I see I struck a nerve," Angela observed, her voice softening just enough to be more dangerous. "Let me guess. She controlled everything. Your clothes, your friends, your schedule. You were her project, her trophy, her entertainment. And when you finally tried to assert yourself, maybe an affair, maybe just an opinion she didn't like, she cut you off. Cut you out. Reminded you that everything you had was because of her, and she could take it all away in a heartbeat." Peter stared at her, his face burning with shame because every word was true. "I did my research," Angela said quietly. "I know Meryl Streep married you 6 months after you left me. I know you signed a prenuptial agreement that gave you nothing if the marriage ended in divorce. I know she caught you sleeping with her personal assistant in 2019 and filed for divorce. I know she died of a stroke in 2022 and left everything to her niece. Cutting you out of her will completely. I know you took the divorce settlement, a mere $2 million, and tried to build your own empire, desperate to prove you were more than just her pet project." She tilted her head, studying him like a specimen under a microscope. "And I know you failed. 3 ventures in 5 years, all of them hemorrhaging money. You're not a businessman, Peter. You're a bartender who got lucky once and thought he was entitled to more." The silver-haired lawyer was now openly watching the exchange, no longer even pretending to review documents. Martin Chun looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The security detail remained impassive, but Peter could feel their contempt radiating off them in waves. "So here's what's going to happen," Angela said, standing and gathering her tablet with the finality of a judge adjourning court. "I'm going to take your proposal back to my team. We're going to evaluate Langston Enterprises with the same rigor we apply to every potential investment. And in 2 weeks, you'll receive our decision." She moved toward the door, her cream suit perfect, not a wrinkle or crease to betray the emotional weight of this conversation. Her lawyers and security detail rose as one, a choreographed movement that spoke of practice and protocol. Peter stood on shaking legs. "Angela, wait. Please. I know I don't deserve." She stopped, hand on the door handle, but didn't turn around. "I never stopped thinking about you," Peter said, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Every day for 21 years, I wondered if I made the right choice. I wondered about our child. I regretted." "Regret is just guilt wearing a prettier dress," Angela interrupted, and now she did turn, her eyes meeting his one last time. "It doesn't change anything. It doesn't build a business or raise a child or heal a wound. Regret is what people feel when they're too cowardly to feel shame." She opened the door, and her entourage filed out behind her. But before she left, she looked back at him one more time. "2 weeks, Peter. We'll be in touch." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Peter collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking, his heart racing, his entire body feeling like it had been hollowed out and filled with lead. Martin Chun was saying something about next steps and legal strategies, but Peter couldn't hear him over the roar of blood in his ears. He had a son named Elijah, 20 years old, MIT graduate, venture capitalist. Believed his father was dead. And the woman he'd abandoned, the woman he'd convinced himself would be just fine without him, had built an empire that made his achievements look like a child's sandcastle before the tide. Peter pulled out his phone with trembling hands, scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Someone who might help him understand what he was dealing with. Someone who knew Angela's world. But before he could dial, Martin's hand covered his. "Peter," his lawyer said carefully, "whatever you're thinking of doing, don't. That woman in there? She's not just powerful. She's strategic. She's already 3 moves ahead of you. The best thing you can do right now is go home, stay quiet, and let me handle this." Peter wanted to argue, wanted to fight, wanted to do something, anything, to take control of a situation that had spiraled so far beyond his grasp that he couldn't even see the edges anymore. But he didn't. He just nodded, stood on legs that felt like water, and walked out of the conference room on the 47th floor of the Apex Tower, out into a Manhattan afternoon that felt colder than any Boston winter he remembered. Across town, in her penthouse office at Phoenix Global's New York headquarters, Angela stood at her own floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at a city she'd conquered one deal at a time. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the windowsill, forcing herself to breathe through the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm the carefully constructed walls she'd spent 2 decades building. Seeing Peter's face, older yes, but still recognizably the face of the man she'd loved with the desperate intensity of youth, had cracked something inside her she'd thought was permanently sealed. Her assistant, Marcus, a sharp 28-year-old who'd been with her for 6 years and knew her better than almost anyone, appeared in the doorway with a cup of the chamomile tea she always drank after difficult meetings. "You okay, boss?" he asked gently. Angela didn't turn around. "Do you know what I thought when I saw him sitting there, Marcus?" For just a second, before the anger kicked in. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I thought he got old." "Isn't that stupid? Like I expected him to be frozen in time, exactly as he was when he left." Marcus said nothing, just set the tea on her desk and waited. "I built all of this," Angela continued, gesturing at the skyline, at the office with its original artwork and imported furniture and awards lining the shelves. "Everything I am now, I built on the foundation of that pain. Of being left. Of being told I wasn't worth staying for. And for years, I told myself that was enough. That success was the best revenge. That watching him fail while I soared would feel satisfying." She finally turned, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But it doesn't, Marcus. It just feels empty." Marcus moved closer, his expression sympathetic. "What are you going to do about the investment proposal?" Angela picked up the tea, letting its warmth seep into her cold hands. "The smart thing would be to reject it outright. Let Langston Enterprises collapse. Watch him lose everything like he made me lose everything 21 years ago." "But," Marcus prompted. "But Elijah works for Quantum Ventures," Angela said quietly. They're one of Peter's biggest competitors. If Langston Enterprises collapses, Quantum absorbs the assets. Which means Elijah would be in a position to benefit from his father's failure, without ever knowing it's his father. She set down the tea, suddenly angry at herself for even caring. I need you to pull every file we have on Langston Enterprises. Every financial record, every board meeting, every transaction. I want to know exactly how deep this hole goes and whether there's anything worth saving. Already on it, Marcus said. But Angela? Can I ask you something? She nodded. What do you really want to happen here? Not the strategic CEO answer. The human answer. Angela was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph on her desk. Elijah at his graduation, brilliant and proud, looking so much like Peter it had made her chest ache when she'd first seen it. Her son. Her beautiful, brilliant son who thought his father had loved him enough to be worth grieving. I want him to understand, she finally said. I want Peter to know what it cost. Not just me, what it cost Elijah. What it cost the life we could have had. I want him to sit with that knowledge and feel it in his bones the way I've felt it every single day for 21 years. And then? Marcus asked. Angela smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And then I'll decide if he deserves mercy or justice. Peter didn't go home after the meeting. He couldn't face the empty condo in Queens, the place Meryl had let him keep in the divorce only because it was mortgaged to the ceiling and she considered it beneath her dignity to own. Instead, he found himself driving north, away from Manhattan's gleaming towers, toward the only place that had ever felt like an anchor when his world was spinning apart. Boston. The drive took 4 hours through autumn rain that streaked his windshield like tears. By the time he pulled up outside the old building in Allston, miraculously still standing, though renovated beyond recognition, darkness had fallen and the November cold had teeth. He sat in his car across the street, engine running, heat blasting, staring up at what used to be their studio apartment. 3rd floor, corner unit. The windows were dark now, or maybe lit by someone else's dreams. A young couple, probably. Someone starting out the way he and Angela once had, believing love could conquer logistics and poverty and fear. Peter's phone buzzed. A text from Martin Chin. Board meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. They're getting nervous. Need to give them something. He ignored it. Scrolled instead through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in years. David Morrison. Old college roommate. Investment banker. Someone who'd moved in the same circles as Meryl, who'd know the real story behind Phoenix Global Holdings. David answered on the 3rd ring, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone whose biggest problem was deciding which vacation home to visit for Thanksgiving. Langston? Jesus, I thought you were dead. Haven't heard from you since Meryl's funeral. I need information, Peter said, skipping pleasantries. Angela Bassett. Phoenix Global Holdings. What do you know? A pause. Then a low whistle. Why are you asking about Angela Bassett? You trying to get into tech investment? Because, brother, I hate to break it to you, but she's about 15 leagues out of your... David, please. Something in Peter's voice must have registered. David's tone shifted, became serious. All right. What do you want to know? Everything. How she built it. Where the money came from. How she went from nothing to $47 billion in 13 years. Another pause. Peter could hear ice clinking in a glass. David's bourbon, probably. Top shelf. Always top shelf. It's actually a fascinating story, David said. She's like a business school case study. Started with nothing, literally nothing. Single mom, nursing job, living in her parents' basement. But she had this gift for seeing inefficiencies in healthcare systems. Started consulting, made a name for herself. By 2012, she had enough capital to start Phoenix Global as a healthcare consulting firm. Peter listened, his heart hammering. This was the part of Angela's story he hadn't heard in that conference room. But here's where it gets interesting, David continued. In 2013, she received a major capital injection, $5 million, from some charitable trust. Nobody knew where it came from at the time. With that money, she made her first acquisition. A medical device startup in Cambridge that was circling the drain. She turned it around, sold it in 18 months, tripled her money. $5 million. 2013. Peter's mind raced backward. That was the same year Meryl had established her women's entrepreneurship fund. The one she'd spent months setting up, working with lawyers and accountants, being unusually secretive about the recipients. No, it couldn't be. David, Peter interrupted, his voice hoarse. This trust. Was it called the Streep Foundation for Women's Enterprise? Yeah, actually. How did you? David stopped. Oh shit. Peter. Tell me you didn't. Peter's hands were shaking so hard he had to grip the steering wheel to steady them. What else do you know? The foundation funded dozens of women entrepreneurs over the years. Angela Bassett was one of the first. But Peter, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, don't. That foundation was Meryl's legacy project. She established it independently. Whatever happened between you and Angela Bassett has nothing to do with. Peter hung up. Sat in his car in the dark, rain drumming on the roof, staring at nothing while his entire understanding of the last 2 decades rearranged itself like a puzzle revealing a completely different picture. Meryl had funded Angela. Meryl, who'd known about Angela from the beginning, who'd listened to Peter's drunken confessions in those early months about the nursing student he'd left behind, the pregnancy he'd run from, had given Angela $5 million. Why? Guilt? Some twisted form of atonement? A power play, ensuring that the woman Peter had abandoned would rise so high that his betrayal would be thrown into even sharper relief? Or had Meryl, in her own cold, calculating way, recognized something in Angela that she'd never seen in Peter? The drive. The hunger. The willingness to build something real instead of just wearing someone else's success like borrowed clothes? Peter pulled out his phone again. Opened the browser. Searched for Angela Bassett Phoenix Global. Dozens of articles. Hundreds. He scrolled through them with growing horror and fascination. Forbes, the single mother who built a billion-dollar empire. Bloomberg, how Angela Bassett disrupted healthcare and tech in 1 decade. Time, 100 most influential people, Angela Bassett, CEO of Phoenix Global Holdings. He clicked on one article from 2019. It included an interview. A quote that made his blood run cold. People ask me what drives me, Dr. Bassett told our reporter over coffee in her San Jose office. The answer is simple. I never want my son to feel powerless the way I once did. I never want him to believe that his worth is determined by his circumstances. Everything I've built, every company acquired, every innovation funded, every scholarship established, it's all for Elijah. To show him that we don't just survive what tries to break us. We rise from it. There was a photo with the article. Angela at her desk, professional and powerful. And there on the credenza behind her, a photograph in a silver frame. A young man. 20 years old, maybe younger when the photo was taken. Dark hair, angular features. His mother's warm brown eyes, but something in the set of his jaw that was pure Peter. Elijah. His son. Peter zoomed in on the photo, his vision blurring with tears he hadn't felt coming. The boy, no, the young man, was laughing in the picture, caught in a moment of pure joy. He wore a MIT sweatshirt. Looked brilliant and kind and complete, a whole person who'd grown up without Peter's guidance or presence or love. And he was better for it. Peter knew that with a certainty that crushed his chest. Elijah had become someone remarkable not despite Peter's absence, but because of it. Because Angela had poured all the love Peter had rejected into raising a son who would never abandon anyone the way his father had abandoned him. The phone rang. Martin Chen again. Peter let it go to voicemail. He couldn't think about Langston Enterprises right now. Couldn't think about board meetings and investor calls and the slow-motion collapse of his latest attempt to prove he was more than Meryl's kept man. All he could think about was the baby he'd never held. The child he'd never watched grow. The son who thought he was dead and had somehow, impossibly, turned out perfect anyway. 3 days later, Phoenix Global Holdings, San Jose headquarters. Angela stood in her corner office, looking out at the Silicon Valley landscape, a sprawl of tech campuses and venture capital firms and dreams being funded at astronomical valuations. Her office was a study in controlled elegance. Warm woods, contemporary art, shelves lined with awards and photographs documenting her rise. Marcus entered without knocking, the privilege of someone who'd earned absolute trust. The forensic accounting team finished their analysis of Langston Enterprises, he said, setting a thick folder on her desk. It's not good. Angela turned from the window, her expression neutral. She wore a charcoal pantsuit today, her hair pulled back in a sleek low bun, diamond studs replaced with simple pearl drops. Armor for a different kind of battle. Tell me. Marcus flipped open the folder. Peter Langston is drowning in debt. The company has assets worth maybe $12 million on paper, but liabilities exceeding $43 million. 3 failed ventures in 5 years, a cryptocurrency exchange that got hacked, a luxury hotel chain that launched right before COVID hit, and a biotech startup that never got past FDA trials. Each failure compounded the last. He pulled out a spreadsheet. But here's the interesting part. The man can't run a business to save his life, but he has good instincts for talent. Every company he's invested in had solid leadership and innovative products. His problem isn't vision, it's execution. He doesn't have the patience or discipline to see things through. He takes shortcuts, makes impulsive decisions, alienates key personnel. Angela sat down, pulling the folder closer. So he's hemorrhaging money, but the underlying assets might have value if managed properly. Exactly. Marcus leaned against her desk. If Phoenix acquired Langston Enterprises, absorbed the leadership teams from those failed ventures, and integrated them into our existing portfolio, we could probably turn a profit within 3 years. It's actually not a terrible investment from a purely strategic standpoint. But, Angela prompted, but the optics are complicated. You'd be saving your ex-boyfriend's company. The media would have a field day. Billionaire bails out baby daddy isn't exactly the headline you want. Angela was quiet for a long moment, fingers tracing the edge of the folder. What if we structured it differently? Not a bailout. A hostile takeover. We acquire Langston Enterprises, strip Peter of his voting shares, install new leadership, and keep him on only as a consultant, powerless, controlled, essentially an employee of the company he founded. Marcus considered this. That's brutal. That's business, Angela corrected. But something in her voice wavered. She stood abruptly, walking to the window again, her tell, Marcus knew. The thing she did when emotions threatened to breach the fortress walls. Did you know Meryl Streep funded my first major investment? Angela asked quietly. Marcus straightened. What? The Streep Foundation for Women's Enterprise. $5 million in 2013. I didn't know where it came from at the time. The foundation kept beneficiary identities confidential. But I did some digging after that meeting with Peter. The timing matched. Meryl established the foundation 6 months after she married him. She turned, her expression unreadable. The woman who stole my boyfriend funded the empire I built. Tell me how I'm supposed to feel about that, Marcus. I think, Marcus said carefully, that Meryl Streep recognized something in you that she never saw in Peter. Real ambition. Real hunger. She gave you capital because you were worth the investment. That's not charity, it's smart business. Or it's guilt, Angela countered. A wealthy woman trying to absolve herself for destroying another woman's life by throwing money at the problem. Does it matter? Marcus asked. You turned that $5 million into $47 billion. You built this empire with your own brilliance and determination. Whether Meryl's motives were pure or not, you're the one who did the work. Angela wanted to believe that. Needed to believe that. But something about the revelation had unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Please. I need to talk to you. About Elijah. Peter. Her blood ran cold. How did he get my personal number? She demanded. Marcus was already pulling out his own phone, fingers flying. I'll have IT trace it and block. No, Angela interrupted. She stared at the message, her heart hammering. Leave it. But monitor any further communications. I want to know if he tries to reach out again. Angela, Marcus said carefully, he's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. If he tries to contact Elijah. He won't, Angela said with more confidence than she felt. He's too much of a coward for that. He knows that revealing himself to Elijah would mean explaining why he left. Why he chose money over his own child. Peter might be many things, but he's not stupid enough to think that conversation would end well for him. But as she said it, doubt crept in. How desperate was Peter? Desperate enough to break the one boundary that would detonate both their lives? Her office phone rang. Her assistant's voice came through the speaker. Dr. Bassett, you have a visitor in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent. A Mr. Peter Langston. Angela and Marcus exchanged looks. Tell security to escort him out, Marcus said immediately. But Angela held up a hand. Her mind was racing, calculating, trying to stay 3 moves ahead the way she always did. Peter coming here, to her headquarters, unannounced and desperate. This was either incredibly stupid or a calculated risk. Either way, she needed to control the narrative. Send him up, she said. But have security stay close. And Marcus? I want you in the room. Angela. I'm not afraid of him, she said firmly. And I'm not hiding. If Peter Langston wants a conversation, we'll have it on my terms, in my office, with witnesses present. Would you confront someone from your past if they showed up unannounced, demanding answers? Or would you shut the door and protect your peace? Let me know what you'd do. 10 minutes later, Peter Langston stood in the doorway of her office, and Angela's carefully maintained composure nearly cracked. He looked terrible. His suit, the same one from the Apex Tower meeting, she realized, was rumpled now, like he'd slept in it. Or hadn't slept at all. His eyes were bloodshot, shadowed with exhaustion and something else. Desperation. And beneath that, a grief so raw it was almost painful to witness. You shouldn't be here, Angela said, her voice cold enough to freeze. I know. Peter's voice was hoarse. I know I shouldn't. But I couldn't, I can't, Angela. I saw his picture. Elijah. In that article. And I just... He stopped, his composure crumbling. I just needed to see you. To tell you. Tell me what? Angela demanded, standing now, her hands flat on her desk. That you're sorry? That you regret your choices? That seeing one photograph of the son you abandoned suddenly makes you want to be a father? It's 21 years too late, Peter. I know that. Peter's voice cracked, rose, then fell to barely a whisper. God, Angela, I know that. I know I don't deserve to even speak his name. But please, please just tell me, is he happy? Did my absence at least give him that? The question, so raw, so genuine, caught Angela off guard. She'd expected excuses, justifications, perhaps another attempt at manipulation. But this? This broken man asking not for forgiveness, but just for confirmation that his son had been better off without him? She didn't know how to respond to that. He's brilliant, she finally said, her voice softer despite herself. Top of his class at MIT. Double major in computer science and business. He works in venture capital now. Quantum Ventures. He's funding startups that focus on social impact, education technology, clean energy, healthcare access for underserved communities. Peter's face crumpled. He sank into the chair nearest the door, uninvited, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. He sounds like you. He's nothing like me, Angela said sharply. He's kind. Open. He trusts people. He believes in the inherent goodness of humanity. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge of pain. He's everything I used to be before you taught me that love was a weakness. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the building's HVAC system and the distant sound of traffic 47 stories below. I found out about Merrill, Peter said suddenly, looking up at her with red-rimmed eyes. About the foundation. About the $5 million. Angela's expression didn't change, but Marcus shifted slightly, alert. She funded you, Peter continued. The woman I left you forgave you the money to build this empire. And the worst part? She probably knew exactly what she was doing. Meryl was never sentimental, but she understood irony. She knew that by funding you, she was ensuring that one day, you'd surpass anything I could ever achieve. He laughed, a broken sound that hurt to hear. She must have found it hilarious. Her final revenge on me, making sure the woman I abandoned would become the woman who could destroy me. Meryl Streep didn't fund me as revenge, Angela said quietly. She funded me because she recognized talent and potential. Something you never did. That's not true. Peter stood again, moved closer to her desk. Marcus tensed, but Angela waved him off. Angela, I knew from the moment I met you that you were destined for something greater than me. That was the problem. I was terrified I'd hold you back. That you'd wake up one day and realize you'd sacrificed your dreams for a bartender with a philosophy degree and a baby we couldn't afford. So you made the decision for me, Angela said, her voice sharp as broken glass. You decided what I could or couldn't handle. You decided that I was better off alone, pregnant, abandoned. You didn't even give me the choice. You're right. Peter's voice was barely audible. You're absolutely right. I was a coward. I ran because I was afraid of poverty, afraid of failure, afraid of watching you resent me for tying you down. But Angela. He met her eyes, and she saw in them something she'd never expected to see, genuine bone-deep remorse. Not a single day has passed when I didn't regret that choice. Not one. Regret doesn't pay rent, Angela said coldly. Regret doesn't buy diapers or formula or sit up all night with a sick baby while trying to study for nursing exams. Regret is a luxury for people who have the privilege of looking back instead of constantly scrambling forward. She walked around her desk now, approaching him, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. When she spoke again, her voice dropped to barely a whisper, but it carried more power than any shout. You want to know if I forgive you, Peter? If seeing you broken and desperate somehow satisfies the part of me that spent 21 years building walls so thick that no one could ever hurt me again. She stopped inches from him, close enough to see the gray threaded through his hair, the lines around his eyes, the weight of his choices etched into his face. The answer is no. I don't forgive you. And the irony is, your regret means nothing to me. Because I don't need your remorse to validate my success. I don't need your acknowledgement to know that I built something extraordinary from the ashes you left behind. She stepped back, returning to the safety of distance. But here's what I will do, she continued, her voice returning to the crisp, professional tone of a CEO making a business decision. Phoenix Global will acquire Langston Enterprises. Not as a bailout, but as a hostile takeover. We'll restructure the company, absorb your assets, and integrate your teams into our existing portfolio. You'll stay on as a consultant, powerless, controlled, essentially an employee working for a company that once bore your name. Peter stared at her, processing. Why would you do that? Because despite your complete inability to run a business, you have good instincts for talent, Angela said. And because letting Langston Enterprises collapse would put 200 people out of work. People who don't deserve to suffer because you're incompetent. She moved to her desk, pulled out a document, and slid it across to him. These are the terms. Non-negotiable. You sign by the end of the week, or the deal is off the table and you can watch your company implode. Peter picked up the document with shaking hands. Scanned the terms. Each clause was designed to strip him of power while keeping him visible enough to face the consequences of his failures daily. It was brilliant and brutal. It was mercy disguised as revenge. There's one more condition, Angela said, and her voice carried a warning. You stay away from Elijah. You don't contact him. You don't try to reveal yourself to him. You don't even speak his name to anyone outside this room. He has a life, a career, a future that doesn't include the father who abandoned him. If you care about him at all, if you have even a shred of genuine love for the son you never knew, you'll let him keep believing the lie I told him. That his father died a hero instead of living as a coward. Peter's hands trembled on the document. What if I can't do that? What if I need him to know? That you're alive? That you chose money over him? Angela's voice was ice. What exactly do you think that knowledge would give him, Peter? Peace? Closure? Or would it just transfer your guilt onto his shoulders, making him wonder for the rest of his life what was so wrong with him that his own father couldn't stay? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Peter set down the document. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. If I sign this, if I agree to everything, will you at least tell me about him? Not contact. Just, will you let me know he's okay? That he's happy? Angela was quiet for a long moment. Marcus was watching her carefully, probably trying to figure out if she was about to make a decision she'd regret. I'll consider it, she finally said. But Peter? If you violate any term of this agreement, if you try to contact Elijah in any way, I won't just destroy you financially. I'll make sure the entire world knows exactly what kind of man you are. The father who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend for a rich widow. The husband who was kept like a pet and cut off without a penny. The businessman who failed at everything he touched. I'll ensure that your name becomes synonymous with cowardice and failure. She leaned forward, her eyes boring into his. So you need to decide right now what kind of man you want to be. The one who continues making selfish choices, or the one who finally does the right thing, even if it costs you everything. Peter looked at the document. At Angela. At the life he'd built and lost and failed to rebuild. And for the first time in 21 years, he made a choice that wasn't about himself. Where do I sign? The contract signing happened 3 days later in a conference room that felt more like a courtroom. Phoenix Global's legal team, 6 attorneys in matching navy suits, sat on one side of the massive oak table. Peter sat alone on the other, with only Martin Chun beside him, looking like a man attending his own funeral. Angela wasn't present. She'd sent Marcus instead, her absence a calculated statement. Peter Langston wasn't important enough to warrant her time. The humiliation of that burned more than any clause in the contract. Mr. Langston, if you'll initial here, and sign at the bottom, the lead attorney, a woman named Patricia Wolfe with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, slid page after page across the table. Peter initialed. Signed. Watched his company, his last attempt at proving he was more than Merrill's kept man, get absorbed into Angela's empire with the clinical efficiency of a surgical procedure. And finally, Patricia said, producing one last document, the non-disclosure and non-contact agreement regarding Elijah Langston Bassett. Peter's hand hesitated over this one. The paper felt heavier than the others, weighted with 21 years of missed birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories. With baseball games he'd never attended and graduations he'd never witnessed, and a relationship that existed only in the abstract space of what might have been. This agreement stipulates that you will have no direct or indirect contact with Elijah Langston Bassett, Patricia read aloud, her voice professionally neutral, but her eyes carrying judgment. You will not approach him in person, contact him via phone or electronic communication, or reveal your identity or relationship to him through any third party. Violation of this agreement will result in immediate termination of your consulting contract and legal action for breach of contract and emotional distress. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. Furthermore, you acknowledge that Dr. Angela Bassett retains sole discretion regarding if and when to disclose your existence to Mr. Bassett, and you waive any parental rights or claims to relationship or custody. Martin Chun cleared his throat. Peter, you don't have to sign this. You have parental rights under Massachusetts law. I waived those rights 21 years ago, Peter interrupted, his voice hollow. He picked up the pen. Signed his name in a hand that shook so badly the signature was barely legible. There. It was done. He'd officially given up not just his company, but any legal claim to his son. Patricia gathered the documents with practiced efficiency. Welcome to Phoenix Global Holdings, Mr. Langston. Your new position as Strategic Acquisitions Consultant begins Monday. You'll report to Marcus Reed at the New York office. Starting salary is $150,000 annually, a substantial decrease from your previous position, but given the circumstances, quite generous. She stood, and the other attorneys followed like a choreographed movement. Dr. Bassett expects excellence and absolute discretion. We trust you understand what's at stake. They filed out, leaving Peter and Martin alone in the conference room. You just gave away everything, Martin said quietly. Your company. Your son. Your dignity. I hope you know what you're doing. Peter stared at the empty chair where the contracts had been signed. For the first time in 21 years, Martin, I actually do. 6 weeks later, Phoenix Global Holdings, New York office. Peter's new office was a windowless cube on the 32nd floor, sandwiched between the break room and the copy machines. Where Angela's office had floor-to-ceiling windows and original artwork, his had fluorescent lights that hummed incessantly and a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a 1990s government surplus sale. The message was clear: you are not important here. But Peter showed up every day at 7:45 a.m. Stayed until 7 p.m. Worked through lunch at his desk, reviewing acquisition targets and writing reports that Marcus would inevitably mark up with red ink and send back for revision. He was competent at the work. His instincts for identifying promising companies were solid, but he had no authority. Every recommendation he made went through 3 layers of approval before reaching anyone who could actually act on it. He was a cog in a massive machine, and the machine didn't care about his opinions or his ego. It was humbling in a way Peter had never experienced. Even as Meryl's husband, he'd had status, deference, the appearance of power. Here, he was just another mid-level employee, and not even a particularly valued one. His co-workers kept their distance. Word had spread, the way it always did in corporate environments, that Peter Langston was the ex-boyfriend who'd abandoned Dr. Bassett when she was pregnant. The man she'd saved from bankruptcy only to put him in corporate purgatory as punishment. Nobody wanted to be associated with that story. So Peter ate lunch alone. Rode the elevator in silence while other employees whispered behind hands. Became invisible in a way he'd never been before. And strangely, there was a kind of peace in it. No one expected anything from him except competent work. No one asked him to be charming or ambitious or anything other than a body filling a chair and producing reports. For the first time since he was 26 years old, Peter wasn't performing for anyone. It was in his second month at Phoenix Global that Peter saw him. He was leaving the building at 7:15 p.m. on a Thursday, exhausted from a day of reviewing biotech acquisition targets, when he nearly collided with a young man entering the lobby. Sorry, the young man said automatically, stepping aside. And Peter's world stopped. Because he was looking at himself. Or rather, himself 20 years ago, refined and improved. The young man had his angular features, his bone structure, his widow's peak. But he had Angela's warm brown eyes, her generous mouth, her ability to light up a space just by existing. Elijah. Peter knew it with the certainty of bone-deep recognition. This was his son. 21 years old, wearing an expensive charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt open at the collar, carrying a leather messenger bag that probably cost more than Peter's monthly salary. He looked confident, successful, like someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. You okay? Elijah asked, frowning slightly at Peter's frozen expression. Peter's throat closed. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at this miracle standing in front of him, the child he'd never held, the son who'd become a man without him. Peter's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. I'm fine. Sorry. Long day. Elijah smiled, Angela's smile, warm and genuine. Tell me about it. I've got a meeting with the acquisitions team that should have been an email. He glanced at his watch, a Tag Heuer, Peter noticed, tasteful and expensive, and headed toward the elevators. Peter watched him go, rooted to the marble floor, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. His son worked here. In this building. For Phoenix Global Holdings. How had he not known? How had no one mentioned it? Peter pulled out his phone with shaking hands, scrolled to Marcus Reed's contact, typed and deleted 3 different messages before finally settling on, "Why didn't you tell me Elijah works here?" The response came within seconds. "We didn't tell you because it's none of your business. He works for Quantum Ventures, which operates out of our building under a partnership agreement." Stay away from him. M. Peter stared at the message, rage and desperation warring in his chest. They'd put him in this building knowing his son worked here. Knowing that eventually, inevitably, they'd cross paths. This was part of Angela's revenge. Not just taking his company or reducing him to a powerless employee, but forcing him to exist in proximity to the son he could never claim, to see daily what he'd given up and could never reclaim. It was brilliant and cruel. It was exactly what he deserved. Angela's penthouse, that same night. Angela poured herself a glass of wine, a 2015 Chateau Margaux that had cost more than Peter's monthly salary, and settled onto her sofa overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Her penthouse was all clean lines and muted colors, a sanctuary of controlled elegance 15 stories above the chaos of the city. Marcus had called her an hour ago. Peter saw Elijah in the lobby. They spoke briefly. Nothing significant, but you should know. She'd thanked him, hung up, and immediately poured the wine. She'd known this would happen eventually. The Phoenix Global building housed 17 different companies, including Quantum Ventures where Elijah worked. Peter, showing up daily for his consulting role, would inevitably cross paths with his son. Angela had structured it that way deliberately. She told herself it was about maintaining oversight, ensuring Peter kept his distance. But in her more honest moments, like now, alone with expensive wine and the weight of her choices, she knew it was about something else. She wanted Peter to suffer the way she'd suffered. To see their son thriving and brilliant and completely out of reach. To feel the daily ache of proximity without connection, presence without relationship. But revenge, Angela was discovering, tasted more bitter than sweet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elijah, late meeting at the office. Don't wait up. Love you, Mom. She smiled despite herself. Elijah still lived with her when he was in New York, though he maintained his own place in Boston near his Quantum Ventures office. He was fiercely independent but thoughtful, checking in not because she demanded it, but because he genuinely cared. She'd raised him well. Despite the poverty, the struggle, the nights when she'd cried in the bathroom so he wouldn't hear, she'd given him something Peter never could have, unconditional love and unwavering support. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost declined, but something made her answer. Dr. Bassett? The voice was male, older, unfamiliar. Who is this? My name is Richard Henley. I'm the executor of Meryl Streep's estate. I know this is unusual, but there's something you need to know about Mrs. Streep's charitable foundation and your involvement with it. Angela's grip tightened on the phone. I'm listening. Mrs. Streep left detailed instructions to be disclosed to certain foundation beneficiaries upon specific conditions being met. One of those conditions was Peter Langston's complete financial collapse and his subsequent employment by a foundation beneficiary. Angela's blood went cold. What are you saying? I'm saying Mrs. Streep orchestrated this entire situation. The foundation funding. The provisions in her will. The strategic positioning of assets to ensure Peter would eventually come to you for help. She planned it all before she died. Angela set down her wine glass with a trembling hand. Why would she do that? Richard Henley sighed. May I come see you, Dr. Bassett? This conversation really should happen in person. And there's a letter Mrs. Streep left for you. One I'm instructed to deliver only when certain conditions were met. What conditions? Angela demanded. When Peter Langston became your employee, and when he'd formally waived all rights to his son. Both conditions were met this week. Angela's mind reeled. Meryl had been dead for 3 years, but she was still pulling strings from beyond the grave, orchestrating their lives like pieces on a chessboard. Tomorrow, Angela said. My office. 10 a.m. I'll be there, Richard said, and disconnected. Angela sat in her penthouse surrounded by the empire she'd built, the success she'd earned, the life she'd crafted from abandonment and heartbreak. And for the first time in 21 years, she wondered if any of it had truly been her choice at all. The next morning, Angela's office. Richard Henley was exactly what Angela expected, 70-ish, silver-haired, wearing a suit that had been expensive in 1995 and meticulously maintained ever since. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Angela. Dr. Bassett, thank you for seeing me." He settled into the chair across from her desk with the careful movements of someone whose joints no longer cooperated as smoothly as they once had. "You said you have a letter from Meryl Streep," Angela said without preamble. "I'd like to see it." Richard opened his briefcase, withdrew a cream-colored envelope with Angela's name written in elegant script, and slid it across the desk. Angela stared at it like it might explode. "Before I open this, I need to understand something. You said Meryl orchestrated this situation. How long had she been planning it?" "Since 2013, Richard said. "The year she established the foundation and funded your first major acquisition. Mrs. Streep was a brilliant strategist, Dr. Bassett. Brilliant and, if I may say so, quite ruthless. She understood human nature better than anyone I've ever met." "And what did she understand about this situation?" Richard folded his hands in his lap. "That Peter Langston was a man driven by ambition but lacking the discipline to achieve it. That you were a woman with the opposite qualities, discipline and drive but lacking capital to deploy it. That by funding you, she could ensure two outcomes, your success and his ultimate failure. She found a certain poetry in the idea of you eventually surpassing him so thoroughly that he'd have no choice but to come to you for salvation." Angela felt sick. "She used me." "She invested in you," Richard corrected gently. "There's a difference. Mrs. Streep genuinely believed you would succeed. But yes, she also enjoyed the irony of it. She was a complicated woman." Angela picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. Opened it. Inside was a single page of stationery, the same cream color as the envelope, with Meryl's precise handwriting covering it. "Dear Angela, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked. Peter is ruined, you are powerful, and he's come to you seeking salvation. I imagine you're feeling quite confused right now, perhaps even betrayed, wondering if any of your success was truly your own. Let me be clear, it was. I gave you capital, yes. But capital is merely a tool. What you did with that tool, the empire you built, the innovations you funded, the lives you changed, that was entirely your doing. I could have funded 1,000 women with your intelligence and drive. You're the one who turned that investment into $47 billion. I funded you for selfish reasons, I'll admit. I wanted to hurt Peter the way he'd hurt you. I wanted him to spend his life watching you rise while he floundered, knowing he'd chosen me over you and lost everything in the bargain. It was petty and vindictive, and I'm not sorry. But I also funded you because I saw myself in you. Not the woman I was, but the woman I could have been if I'd had to fight for everything instead of inheriting it. You had hunger I never possessed because I never needed to be hungry. You had discipline I never developed because I never needed to be disciplined. You were everything I might have admired in myself if I'd been capable of building instead of merely maintaining. Peter was my husband for 16 years. I thought I could remake him into something worthy of the opportunities one provided. I failed. He remained a bartender at heart, charming, opportunistic, fundamentally weak. When he betrayed me with my assistant, I wasn't heartbroken. I was annoyed. Annoyed that I'd wasted so much time on such a small man. So I cut him off completely. And I ensured that everything in my estate would be structured to drive him toward this exact moment. Powerless, desperate, forced to bow before the woman he abandoned. What you do with that power is entirely up to you, Angela. You can destroy him. You certainly have the right. Or you can show him the mercy he never showed you. Either choice is valid. But whatever you choose, know this, you are not my creation. You are not my revenge. You are entirely, beautifully, terrifyingly your own. With respect and perhaps a touch of envy. Meryl Streep. Angela set down the letter, her hands shaking. Marcus, who'd been standing quietly by the window, moved closer. "What does it say?" he asked gently. Angela laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "She played us. All of us. Peter, me, probably half of Boston's business community. She orchestrated this entire situation like we were pieces on a chessboard, and she's been dead for 3 years and still winning." Richard Henley stood. Mrs. Streep also left instructions regarding the foundation. She wanted you to have full control of it upon Peter's employment by any foundation beneficiary. The Streep Foundation for Women's Enterprise is now entirely under your discretion. $27 million in remaining assets to deploy as you see fit. He placed a folder on her desk. The paperwork is here. You're the sole director now. Mrs. Streep felt you'd use the resources more wisely than any board of trustees could. He moved toward the door, paused. For what it's worth, Dr. Bassett, I was Mrs. Streep's attorney for 40 years. I saw her build and destroy more lives than I can count. But I never saw her express respect for anyone the way she did for you in that letter. Whatever her motives, I believe she genuinely admired you. He left Angela alone. Angela sat in her office for 20 minutes after Richard Henley left, staring at Meryl's letter until the elegant script blurred. Outside her windows, Manhattan moved through its daily rhythms, taxis honking, pedestrians hustling, the relentless churn of commerce and ambition. But inside this climate-controlled sanctuary 47 floors above it all, time seemed suspended. Marcus finally broke the silence. What are you going to do? I don't know, Angela admitted, and the honesty of it felt like stepping off a cliff. For 21 years, she'd always known what to do next. Every decision had been calculated, strategic, deliberate. But this? Discovering that her entire rise had been engineered, at least in its inception, by the woman who'd stolen her life? She felt unmoored. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. Mom, can we do dinner tonight? Need to talk to you about something. Important. Her stomach clenched. Important could mean anything. A new job opportunity. A relationship. Or her deepest fear, questions about his father that she'd eventually run out of ways to deflect. She texted back, of course. Osteria Morini at 7? Perfect. Love you. Angela set down the phone and looked at Marcus. Elijah wants to talk tonight. Something important. Marcus's expression shifted to concern. You think he's found something out? I think I'm paranoid, Angela said, but her voice lacked conviction. He's 21. Important probably means he wants to backpack through Europe, or he met someone he's serious about. Or he Googled his last name and found articles about Langston Enterprises being acquired by Phoenix Global, Marcus said quietly. Angela, Peter's name has been in the business press. If Elijah was curious, if he started digging. Then I deal with it, Angela interrupted, standing abruptly. I've been preparing for this conversation for 21 years. I can handle it. But could she? Could she look her brilliant, trusting son in the eyes and maintain the lie she built his entire childhood on? That his father had died a hero instead of living as a coward just floors below where Elijah worked every day? I need to clear my head, Angela said, grabbing her coat, a camel-colored cashmere that had cost $3,000 and felt like armor. I'm going for a walk. Angela. Alone, Marcus. I need to think. She left before he could protest. Central Park, late morning. The November air was crisp enough to bite, carrying the scent of dying leaves and approaching winter. Angela walked without destination, her expensive heels clicking against pavement until she found herself at Bethesda Fountain, watching tourists take selfies and street musicians play for donations. She'd come here once before. 22 years ago, on a rare weekend trip to New York with Peter. They'd been so young, so in love, so convinced that passion and determination could overcome logistics and poverty. They'd stood at this very fountain, and Peter had kissed her and whispered, "One day we'll live in this city. We'll have everything we ever dreamed of." He'd been half right. She did have everything. And he had nothing. Dr. Bassett? Angela turned, her heart stopping. Peter stood 10 feet away, wearing the same rumpled suit she'd seen him in at the office, looking as shocked to see her as she was to see him. He'd clearly been walking too, his cheeks reddened from cold, his hair wind-disheveled. "What are you doing here?" Angela demanded, instinctively defensive. "I could ask you the same thing," Peter said. "I was just walking. Needed air." "I didn't expect," he stopped, seemed to realize how this looked. "I'm not following you. I swear." I was just walking, Angela finished, and something in her chest loosened slightly. I know. So was I. They stood in awkward silence, two people who'd once known each other more intimately than anyone else in the world, now strangers navigating the minefield of shared history. I got a letter from Meryl's estate attorney, Angela said finally, surprising herself. Did you know she planned all of this? That she funded my business specifically to set you up for failure? Peter's face drained of color. What? Angela pulled out her phone, opened the photo she'd taken of Meryl's letter, and handed it to him. Watched his face as he read, saw the progression of emotions: shock, hurt, anger, and finally bitter acceptance. Of course she did, he said, handing back the phone. Meryl was always 3 moves ahead of everyone. I thought I was using her to escape poverty, but she was using me to, what? Entertain herself? Prove a point. He laughed, the sound harsh and broken. We were both her puppets. You know that, right? She funded you to hurt me, and she married me to prove she could control someone young and desperate. Neither of us were ever free agents in this. That's not true, Angela said sharply. I built Phoenix Global. Me. Not Meryl's money. Not her revenge. I turned $5 million into $47 billion through my own brilliance and work and sacrifice. Whatever her motives, I earned everything I have. I know that, Peter said quietly. God, Angela, I know that. You are always going to be extraordinary. With or without Meryl's money, with or without me. That was never in question. He moved closer to the fountain, staring into its water. I saw Elijah yesterday. In the lobby. Angela's breath caught. I know. Marcus told me. He looks like me, Peter said, his voice thick with emotion. But he has your eyes. Your smile. He looked happy, confident, like someone who's never questioned whether he belongs in the world. He turned to face her, tears streaming down his face without shame. Thank you for that. For raising him to be someone I could never be. Angela felt her own eyes burning. Don't thank me. You don't get to thank me for doing what you should have done. What any parent should do. You're right, Peter said. But I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you for loving our son enough for both of us. Thank you for protecting him from knowing what a coward his father is. Thank you for... Stop, Angela interrupted, her voice cracking. Just stop. You don't get to have this cathartic moment where you apologize and feel better about yourself. You don't get absolution just because you finally feel guilty. I know, Peter whispered. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I needed you to know that I see it. All of it. What it cost you. What you built anyway. What you sacrificed. I see it, and it destroys me every single day. They stood on opposite sides of the fountain, the water between them like a barrier across time and choices and irreparable damage. I'm having dinner with Elijah tonight, Angela said finally. He says he needs to talk to me about something important. I think, she stopped, the fear finally voiced. I think he might have found out about you. Peter's face went pale. What makes you think that? Mother's intuition. The way he's been asking questions lately about his father. About my life before he was born. Little things that individually mean nothing but together. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite her expensive coat. What do I tell him, Peter? If he asks me directly, what do I say? Peter was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite the tears still tracking down his face. You tell him the truth. Whatever version of it you can live with. But Angela. He met her eyes across the fountain. Don't protect me. Not if it means lying to him again. He deserves better than that. Better than both of us gave him. Angela wanted to argue. Wanted to say that protecting Elijah from the truth was the right choice, the merciful choice. But standing here in the cold November air, facing the man who'd once been her entire world, she wasn't sure anymore. I should go, she said, checking her watch. I have a meeting in an hour. Angela. Peter called as she turned to leave. For what it's worth. If I could go back. If I could unmake every choice I made 21 years ago. He stopped, shook his head. But I can't. So all I can say is this: whatever you decide about Elijah, about me, about all of it, I'll accept it. I won't fight you. I won't cause problems. I'll just accept the consequences of who I've been. Angela nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and walked away from the fountain, from Peter, from a conversation that had cracked open wounds she'd thought were healed. Osteria Morini, 7 p.m. The restaurant was one of Elijah's favorites. Warm lighting, exposed brick, the kind of Italian food that felt like home even though neither of them had ever been to Italy. Angela arrived 10 minutes early, ordered a glass of Chianti she wouldn't drink, and tried to quiet the racing thoughts that had plagued her all afternoon. Elijah arrived exactly on time. Her son was nothing if not punctual, wearing dark jeans and a navy sweater that made him look impossibly young. He hugged her before sitting, the easy affection that had always existed between them, and Angela felt her heart crack slightly. What if this was the last normal moment they'd ever have? You look stressed, Elijah said, studying her face with the intensity he brought to everything. Work crazy. Always, Angela deflected. But I'm never too busy for you. What did you want to talk about? Elijah fiddled with his napkin, suddenly nervous in a way that made Angela's maternal instincts flare. So, I've been offered an opportunity. A really big one. Relief flooded through her. Work. This was about work. Tell me. You know the Summit Partners acquisition we've been working on at Quantum? The biotech startup developing cancer immunotherapy. His eyes lit up the way they always did when he talked about meaningful work. They want me to move to San Francisco. Lead the integration team. It's a huge promotion, Mom. VP level. At 21. Pride and loss warred in Angela's chest. Elijah, that's amazing. You absolutely should. There's more, he interrupted. The company they're acquiring? It was one of the assets from the Langston Enterprises portfolio. When Phoenix Global did the hostile takeover, they spun off some of the biotech assets to Quantum, and I've been working on due diligence. Angela's blood went cold. I see. Mom, I found something. Elijah pulled out his phone, opened a file, and slid it across the table. Look at the original cap table from 2019. The founding investors. Angela looked. Her hands started trembling before her brain fully processed what she was seeing. There, listed as a founding investor in the biotech startup, Peter J. Langston, with a birth date that would make him 47 years old. The same age Peter would be if he hadn't died 21 years ago. I thought it was a coincidence at first, Elijah said, his voice careful, controlled. A common name. But then I started digging. Peter Langston, bartender from Boston, married Meryl Streep in 2004. Same year my father supposedly died in a car accident. He paused. There was no car accident, was there, Mom? Angela couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. The restaurant noise, laughter, clinking glasses, the casual sounds of people whose worlds weren't imploding, felt distant and surreal. Mom, Elijah said gently. Is my father alive? 21 years of carefully constructed lies collapsed in the space between heartbeats. Yes, Angela whispered. He's alive. Elijah sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Not angry yet, not hurt yet, just processing. Her brilliant son, taking in data and adjusting his worldview to accommodate new information. Where is he? Elijah asked, his voice still calm, but Angela could hear the tremor underneath. He works for Phoenix Global, Angela said, the truth coming out in pieces, each one feeling like peeling back skin. As a consultant. In New York. He's been there for 2 months. She watched Elijah's face as the implications hit. He works in our building. The building where I work. Where you work. Yes. How long have you known he was alive? I've always known, Angela said, and now her own voice was shaking. I'm the one who told you he died, Elijah. I lied to you because I thought, she stopped, tears burning her eyes. "I thought you'd be better off believing your father died loving you than knowing he chose to leave." "Chose to leave," Elijah repeated, his voice hardening now, the anger starting to surface. "What does that mean?" And so Angela told him. All of it. The pregnancy test on the kitchen table. The 14-word letter. Peter leaving for Merrill's mansion and never looking back. The years of struggle, of poverty, of building an empire from abandonment and rage. Phoenix Global's acquisition of Langston Enterprises. Peter's current position as a powerless consultant working floors below, where his son built venture capital deals. With every word, she watched Elijah's face transform, from shock to hurt to fury to something more complicated she couldn't quite read. When she finished, the silence at their table was absolute. "So let me get this straight," Elijah finally said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "My father abandoned you when you were pregnant because a rich woman offered him an easy life. You built $1 billion empire while raising me alone. And when he failed at everything and came to you desperate, you gave him a job specifically so he'd have to see me every day without being able to claim me. Is that about right?" "Elijah." "And you thought lying to me for 21 years was the merciful choice?" His voice cracked. "Making me grieve someone who wasn't dead? Making me wonder my entire childhood what he was like, what we would have been together, whether I was anything like him, and all along you knew he was just a coward who chose money over me." "I was protecting you," Angela said desperately. "I didn't want you to grow up feeling rejected, unwanted." "But I was rejected." Elijah's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it with visible effort. "I was unwanted. By him. And you lied about it, which means I never even got to process that truth. I've been grieving a fantasy." He stood abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. "I need air. I need to think." "Elijah, please." "Does he know?" Elijah interrupted. "That I found out? Does Peter Langston know his son knows he exists?" "No," Angela said. "I haven't told him." "Good," Elijah said, his jaw set in a way that reminded Angela painfully of Peter. "Don't. I need to figure out what I want to do with this information. And I need to do it without you or him trying to control the narrative." He walked out of the restaurant, leaving Angela sitting alone at a table set for two, surrounded by the ruins of the most important relationship in her life. Phoenix Global Building, 11:47 p.m. Peter was working late, as he did most nights, when he heard the knock on his office door. He looked up, expecting security doing their rounds, and instead saw a young man in a navy sweater standing in his doorway. "Elijah." Peter's heart stopped. "Mr. Langston," Elijah said, his voice cool and professional. "I'm Elijah Bassett. I believe you worked on the biotech portfolio that Quantum Ventures just acquired from your former company." He didn't know. Peter realized with a mixture of relief and disappointment that Elijah had no idea who he was looking at. He was just here about work. "Yes," Peter managed, his voice rough. "Can I help you with something?" Elijah stepped into the office, and Peter saw him take in the windowless cube, the cheap desk, the complete absence of status or power. Saw the slight confusion cross his face. Why would a major acquisition partner be relegated to such a pathetic workspace? "I wanted to ask you about the cancer immunotherapy startup you invested in," Elijah said. "Your due diligence was actually quite thorough. Better than most of the work I've seen from Langston Enterprises. I'm wondering why the company failed despite the solid fundamentals." Peter swallowed hard. "Poor management. I made impulsive decisions, cut corners, alienated key researchers. The science was good, but I couldn't execute the business plan." Elijah said, studying him with an intensity that made Peter feel transparent. "That seems to be a pattern with you. Good instincts, poor execution." There was something in his tone, not quite accusation, but close. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Langston?" Elijah said, leaning against the doorframe in a way that was so achingly familiar. Angela used to stand exactly like that when she was thinking through a problem. "Why are you really working here?" Peter's throat went dry. "I'm sorry." "You founded a company. built it from nothing. Sure, it failed, but most entrepreneurs fail multiple times before they succeed. Yet here you are in a windowless office that's barely bigger than a closet, working as a consultant for a woman who, according to the business press, has every reason to hate you. Elijah tilted his head, his brown eyes, Angela's eyes, boring into Peter with uncomfortable precision. So I'll ask again, why are you really here? Peter's hands trembled beneath his desk where Elijah couldn't see them. This was the moment. The edge of the cliff. He could lie, deflect, maintain the charade. Or he could do what he'd told Angela to do just hours ago at the fountain, tell the truth. I'm here because I made terrible choices 21 years ago, Peter said quietly, and Dr. Bassett is giving me the opportunity to face the consequences of those choices every single day. It's not mercy. It's justice. Elijah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What kind of terrible choices? Peter stood slowly, his legs unsteady. This brilliant young man standing in his doorway, his son God, his son, deserved honesty even if it destroyed whatever fragile peace Peter had managed to construct. The kind where you abandon someone who loves you because you're too much of a coward to face responsibility, Peter said, his voice barely above a whisper. The kind where you choose money and status over everything that actually matters. The kind where you spend 21 years regretting every decision you made, but knowing you can never undo the damage. Elijah was very still. You know who I am. It wasn't a question. Yes, Peter said. I know who you are, Elijah. The name hung between them like a confession. How long have you known? Elijah asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Since the day I walked into the Apex Tower conference room and saw your mother sitting at that table, Peter said. Since she told me she'd had a son. Since she showed me your picture and I saw myself in your face. Elijah pushed off the door frame, his posture shifting from casual to confrontational. And you've been working in this building for 2 months. Seeing me in elevators, in the lobby. You nearly knocked me over last week, and I apologize to you. You've had dozens of opportunities to say something, and you chose silence. Your mother made me sign a contract, Peter said. A non-disclosure, non-contact agreement. If I approached you, if I revealed myself, I'd lose everything and she'd make sure the world knew exactly what kind of man I am. What kind of man are you? Elijah demanded, moving closer. Because right now, I'm trying to reconcile the person my mother described, a coward who left her pregnant and alone, with a man standing in front of me who looks like he hasn't slept in weeks and works in what's basically a broom closet for a company he once owned. Peter laughed, a broken sound. We're both right. I am a coward. I did leave your mother pregnant and alone. I chose a wealthy widow's penthouse over a cramped studio apartment and a future I was terrified of. And now I'm here, paying for those choices in the currency of humiliation and proximity to everything I gave up. Did she tell you? Elijah asked suddenly. Did my mother tell you I know? Is that why you're being honest right now? No, Peter said. She doesn't know you're here. She doesn't know you found out. I'm being honest because you asked me a direct question, and I'm tired of lying. Tired of being the person I've been for 21 years. Elijah moved to the single chair in Peter's office, a rolling desk chair that squeaked when he sat, and stared at Peter with an expression that was equal parts fury and devastating hurt. I grieved you, Elijah said, his voice cracking on the words. My entire childhood, I grieved a father I thought died in a car accident. I used to imagine what you were like. Whether you'd have played catch with me or helped me with homework or been proud of me when I got into MIT. I built this entire fantasy of who you were based on the scraps my mother gave me, that you were kind, that you would have loved me, that you died too soon. Tears were streaming down his face now, and Peter felt his own eyes burning. And all along, you were alive. Living in penthouses and failing at businesses and never once wondering about the son you left behind. Do you have any idea how that feels? To realize that the person you've been mourning didn't just not die, he didn't care enough to live for you. I cared, Peter said desperately. Elijah, I... Don't, Elijah interrupted, his voice sharp as broken glass. Don't you dare tell me you cared. If you cared, you would have stayed. If you cared, You would have fought through the fear and the poverty and the uncertainty because that's what parents do. They don't get to choose the easy path and then claim they cared about the road not taken. He stood abruptly, pacing the small office like a caged animal. I work in venture capital. I fund startups. I bet on people with nothing but an idea and determination. And you know what I've learned? The ones who succeed aren't the smartest or the most talented. They're the ones who don't quit when things get hard. They're the ones who push through failure and fear and doubt because they believe in something bigger than their own comfort. He stopped, facing Peter directly. You had the chance to be that person 21 years ago. You had a brilliant, beautiful woman who loved you and a child on the way and the opportunity to build something meaningful. And you quit. You took the easy path. You failed at the only test that actually mattered. Peter had never felt smaller than he did in this moment, facing his son's righteous anger and knowing he deserved every word. You're right, he said simply. About all of it. I failed. I failed your mother, I failed you, I failed the man I could have been. And there's nothing I can do to change that. No apology that's adequate. No redemption arc that makes it okay. Then why are you still here? Elijah demanded. Why are you subjecting yourself to this? Working in this pathetic office, seeing me around the building, living with the constant reminder of what you gave up. Is it penance? Punishment? Some twisted attempt at redemption? All of the above, Peter said. And because it's the only way I can be close to you without violating the contract I signed. The only way I can see that you're okay, that you became someone extraordinary despite my absence. It's selfish and pathetic, but it's all I have. Elijah stared at him for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed this. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more dangerous. You want to know what the worst part is? It's not that you left. It's not even that you chose money over us. It's that you're still choosing the easy path. You signed a contract that absolved you of responsibility. You took a job that let you play the victim. Poor Peter, reduced to a consultant, suffering in his windowless office. You get to feel like you're paying for your sins without actually having to do the hard work of making amends. The observation cut deeper than any accusation because it was true. What would making amends look like? Peter asked, genuinely wanting to know. I have no idea, Elijah said. But it would start with being honest with my mother about this conversation. With not hiding behind contracts and lawyers and corporate structures. With facing the full weight of what you did instead of parceling it out in manageable doses of daily humiliation. He moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm going to San Francisco. Taking the VP position with the biotech integration. I leave in 3 weeks. And I don't know if I'll ever want to see you again after tonight. But I needed to look you in the eye. Needed to see if there was anything in you worth knowing. And? Peter asked, his voice breaking. Is there? Elijah was quiet for a moment that stretched like hours. I don't know yet. Ask me in 21 years when I've had as much time to think about it as you've had to regret it. He left, and Peter collapsed into his chair, his entire body shaking with sobs he'd been holding back for 2 decades. His son knew. Had looked him in the eye and found him wanting. Had articulated every failure with surgical precision. And the worst part, the absolutely devastating part, was that Elijah was right about everything. Peter pulled out his phone with trembling hands. Typed a message to Angela. Elijah knows. He came to my office. We talked. You need to call him. He hit send before he could second-guess it. Then he put his head in his hands and let himself break apart in the privacy of his windowless office, surrounded by the ruins of every choice he'd ever made. Angela's penthouse, 12:47 a.m. Angela's phone buzzed on her nightstand where she'd been staring at it for 3 hours, unable to sleep, terrified of what Elijah might do with the truth she'd finally given him. Peter's message glowed on the screen, and her heart stopped. She called Elijah immediately. It went to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. On the 3rd attempt, he answered. Mom. Where are you? Angela demanded, already moving toward her closet, pulling on clothes. Are you okay? I'm fine, Elijah said, but his voice was rough, like he'd been crying. I'm at my apartment. I needed space. Peter texted me. He said you came to his office. What happened? I told him exactly what I thought of him, Elijah said. And then I left before I said something I'd regret. He paused. Or maybe I already said things I'll regret. I don't know yet. Angela's hands shook as she pulled on jeans and a sweater. I'm coming over. Mom, it's 1 a.m. I don't care. We need to talk. Actually talk. No more lies. No more protecting each other. Just truth. She heard Elijah exhale shakily. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 20 minutes later, Angela stood in her son's apartment, a modest one-bedroom in Brooklyn that he'd insisted on renting himself despite her offers to buy him something nicer. Elijah sat on his couch in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, his eyes red-rimmed, looking younger than 21 and older than he should have to be. Angela sat beside him, maintaining careful distance, waiting for him to set the terms of this conversation. I was so angry at dinner, Elijah said finally. Angry that you lied. Angry that he exists. Angry that I've been carrying around grief for someone who didn't deserve it. But after I talked to him... He trailed off, struggling for words. What? Angela prompted gently. I'm angry at you too, Elijah said, meeting her eyes. Not for protecting me from him. For protecting me from the truth. You didn't trust me to handle it. You made decisions about my own history without giving me a say. The accusation hurt because it was valid. You're right. I know I'm right, Elijah said, some heat returning to his voice. Mom, you raised me to be strong, independent, to face hard truths and make difficult choices. But then you decided I was too fragile to know my own father was alive? That's not protection, that's control. Angela flinched. I was afraid. Of what? That I'd want to know him? That I'd be hurt by his rejection. Elijah stood, pacing his small living room. I'm hurt anyway, Mom. But now I'm also dealing with 21 years of false memories and grief that wasn't real and the knowledge that my own mother thought I couldn't handle the truth. I'm sorry, Angela whispered. Elijah, I'm so sorry. I thought. You thought you were doing the right thing, Elijah finished. I get that. But good intentions don't erase the impact. You lied to me my entire life. That changes things between us. The words felt like a physical blow. Angela had anticipated Elijah being angry at Peter. She'd prepared for that. But this, her son questioning their relationship, the foundation of trust they'd built, she hadn't seen coming. What do you want from me? Angela asked. How do I fix this? I don't know if you can, Elijah said, and the honesty of it devastated her. I need time to process. Time to figure out who I am now that the story I've always believed about my life isn't true. He sat back down, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that reminded Angela painfully of Peter. I'm still going to San Francisco. Maybe more now than before. I need distance from both of you. Space to think without either of you trying to shape how I feel about this. Okay, Angela said, even though it felt like her heart was being ripped out. Whatever you need. I need you to be honest, Elijah said. From now on. About everything. No more protecting me from uncomfortable truths. No more making decisions about my life without consulting me. If we're going to have a relationship going forward, it has to be between equals. Not mother managing child. You're my son. I'm also an adult, Elijah interrupted. An adult who's apparently been working in the same building as his father for months, while both his parents conspired to keep us apart. That ends now. If Peter wants to know me, if I decide I want to know him, that's my choice. Not yours. Not his. Mine. Angela wanted to argue. Wanted to say that Peter didn't deserve the opportunity, that he'd waived his rights, that protecting Elijah from that man was her job as his mother. But looking at her son's face, so much older now than it had been this morning, she knew those arguments would only drive him further away. Okay, she said instead. Your choice. I won't interfere. I don't believe you, Elijah said bluntly. You've been controlling this narrative for 21 years. You hired him specifically to punish him while keeping him close. You orchestrated this entire situation. Why would you suddenly let go of control now? Because I'm terrified of losing you, Angela wanted to say. Because you're the only thing I built that matters more than Phoenix Global. Because if I can't protect you from pain, what good is all this power? But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she met her son's eyes and chose truth over comfort. You're right. Control is how I've survived. How I built everything. How I protected us from ever being vulnerable again. But you're also right that it's not fair to you. So I'm going to try. To let go. To trust you to make your own choices even when they terrify me. She reached out, taking his hand. But Elijah, I need you to understand something. Every lie I told, every decision I made, it came from love. Misguided, controlling, problematic love, but love nonetheless. You are the best thing I ever did. The only thing that matters when everything else is stripped away. And if I failed you by lying, by trying to protect you from a truth you deserve to know, then I am profoundly sorry. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. I know, Mom. I know you love me. But love isn't enough if it comes with dishonesty. I need to be able to trust you again. And that's going to take time. How much time? Angela asked, hating how desperate she sounded. I don't know, Elijah said. But for now, I need space. I need to go to San Francisco and figure out who I am when I'm not carrying the weight of your pain and his abandonment and 21 years of lies. Angela nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay. Space. I can do that. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, when I look at you, I see the absolute best of both of us. His ambition and charm, my determination and heart. But more than that, I see the parts that are purely you. The kindness he never had. The integrity I had to learn the hard way. You became someone better than either of us despite everything we did wrong. That's all you, Elijah. Don't forget that. She left before he could respond, before she could break down completely in front of him and make this about her pain instead of his. Outside his building, in the cold November night, Angela leaned against her car and let herself fall apart in a way she hadn't since she was 21 and pregnant and utterly alone. She'd built an empire, conquered markets, accumulated wealth and power that most people couldn't imagine. And in one night, the only thing that truly mattered. 3 weeks passed like walking through broken glass. Elijah prepared for his move to San Francisco with clinical efficiency, responding to Angela's texts with polite but distant one-word answers. He didn't visit the penthouse. Didn't call just to talk the way he used to. The easy intimacy they'd shared for 21 years had been replaced by the careful courtesy of acquaintances navigating uncomfortable territory. Angela threw herself into work with a ferocity that alarmed even Marcus. 16-hour days. Back-to-back acquisitions. A hostile takeover of a pharmaceutical company that made headlines for its ruthlessness. She was building, expanding, conquering. Anything to avoid sitting still long enough to feel the crater where her son's trust used to be. And Peter. Peter was drowning. Phoenix Global Building, late December. Peter sat in his windowless office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, staring at a spreadsheet that had stopped making sense 3 hours ago. The building was empty except for security and the occasional obsessive executive, and the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. His phone sat on the desk, dark and silent. No messages. No calls. The only human contact he'd had all week was work emails and the barista at the coffee shop downstairs who knew his order but not his name. He pulled up his browser, typed Elijah Bassett San Francisco into the search bar. Found an article from TechCrunch about Quantum Ventures' new VP of Biotech Integration. There was a photo, Elijah at some industry conference, looking confident and professional, smiling at something off camera. Peter's son. Brilliant. Successful. About to move 3,000 miles away, and Peter would never know anything about his life beyond what could be gleaned from business press and occasional stalking of social media accounts set to private. The bottle of bourbon in his desk drawer, purchased 2 weeks ago, untouched until tonight, called to him with a siren song of oblivion. He pulled it out, broke the seal, poured 3 fingers into a coffee mug with a Phoenix Global logo. The first drink burned. The second less so. By the third, Peter felt the edges of his pain softening into something manageable. His phone buzzed. A text from Martin Chen. Board wants to meet Monday about Q4 performance. You need to have numbers ready. Peter laughed, a broken, bitter sound. He was a consultant now, not a CEO. He didn't have a board. Martin had texted the wrong person, probably meant it for one of his actual important clients. He texted back, wrong person. I don't have a board anymore. Just a windowless office and crippling regret. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, Jesus, Peter. Are you drunk? Getting there. Where are you? Office. Phoenix Global. Floor 32. Come join me for a drink. We can toast to all my failed ventures. The dots appeared and stayed there for a long moment. Then, I'm coming to get you. Don't leave that building. Peter set down his phone and poured another drink. He didn't want Martin to come get him. Didn't want anyone's concern or pity or attempts to make him feel better about a situation that was objectively, irredeemably terrible. He'd lost everything. Again. But this time, he couldn't even blame Merrill or bad luck or market conditions. This time, the failure was entirely, authentically his. His phone rang. Marcus Reed. Peter stared at it for 3 rings before answering. What? Mr. Langston, security just called. They said you're still in the building and you appear intoxicated. Marcus's voice was professional, controlled, but carried an undercurrent of concern. I'm going to need you to go home. You can't be in the office in this condition. Or what? Peter challenged. You'll fire me? Please. That would be doing me a favor. Mr. Langston, Peter, Marcus's voice softened. I know you're going through something difficult. But drinking alone in your office isn't the solution. Let me call you a car. Get you home safely. Home, Peter repeated, the word tasting like ash. You mean my studio apartment in Queens that's smaller than the walk-in closet I had at Merrill's? You mean the place with no pictures on the walls because I don't have any memories worth framing? That home. Yes, Marcus said simply. That home. Because it's better than spending the night in an office that was designed to remind you of your failures. Peter wanted to argue, but the bourbon had made him loose and honest in ways that were probably dangerous. Did you know? When you hired me, when Angela hired me, did you know Elijah worked in this building? Silence on the other end of the line. Then carefully, yes. We knew. So she put me here deliberately. Close enough to see him but never able to claim him. That was the design. Dr. Bassett made decisions based on multiple factors, Marcus said diplomatically. But yes, proximity was part of it. She wanted me to suffer, Peter interrupted. And it worked. God, Marcus, it worked so well. Do you know what it's like to see your son in the elevator and have to pretend you're strangers? To hear him laugh with colleagues and know you'll never be the reason for that laugh? To watch him become this extraordinary person and know that his success is despite you, not because of you. I can't imagine, Marcus said quietly. Well, I can, Peter said, his voice cracking. I can imagine it because I live it every single day. And the worst part? I deserve it. Every second of this torture is exactly what I earned by walking away 21 years ago. He drained his mug, poured another. You want to know what Elijah said to me? When he came to this office and confronted me, he said I was still taking the easy path. That this, he gestured at his office even though Marcus couldn't see it, this performance of suffering was just another way of avoiding real accountability. And he was right. God, he was so right. Peter, I'm sending a car to the building right now, Marcus said firmly. Security will escort you down. You're going home, you're going to sleep this off, and tomorrow we're going to talk about getting you some actual help. Therapy, not bourbon. Support, not isolation. This isn't sustainable. Nothing about my life is sustainable, Peter said. That's kind of the point. The line went dead. Marcus had hung up on him. Peter laughed again, that same broken sound, and realized he was crying. When had he started crying? The tears were there anyway, hot and humiliating, streaming down his face while he sat alone in a windowless office drinking bourbon from a corporate-branded mug. This was rock bottom. Had to be. Couldn't possibly go lower than this. His office door opened. Peter looked up, expecting security, and froze. Angela stood in the doorway. She wore jeans and a simple black sweater, civilian clothes, not her usual armor of designer suits and expensive jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked exhausted and beautiful and furious. "Marcus called me," she said, her voice tight. "Said you were drunk in your office and potentially a danger to yourself." "What the hell, Peter?" Peter set down his mug with exaggerated care. "I'm not a danger to myself. I'm just a danger to expensive bourbon. I've had maybe 4 drinks." "In how long?" "An hour? Maybe 2? Time is relative when you're contemplating the complete wreckage of your existence." Angela stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. The space felt instantly smaller, charged with the electricity of their shared history and present animosity. "You can't do this," she said. "You can't fall apart. You have a job, responsibilities." "Responsibilities," Peter interrupted with a harsh laugh. "That's rich coming from you. What responsibilities do I have, Angela? Reviewing acquisition targets that you'll ignore anyway? Writing reports that exist solely to justify my pathetic paycheck? Staying away from the son who hates me while working in the same building where he exists?" "Elijah doesn't hate you," Angela said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Doesn't he?" Peter stood, unsteady on his feet, and Angela instinctively moved closer as if to catch him. "He came to this office 3 weeks ago and told me I was a coward and a failure and that even my attempt at penance was just another form of selfishness. Those aren't the words of someone who's ambivalent, Angela. Those are the words of someone who looked at their father and found him completely wanting." "He's hurt," Angela said. "He's processing 21 years of lies. Give him time." "I don't have time." Peter's voice rose, all the pain and rage and self-loathing he'd been swallowing for weeks erupting. "He's leaving for San Francisco in 3 days. 3 days, and then he'll be 3,000 miles away and I'll never," his voice broke completely. "I'll never get the chance to." "To what?" Angela demanded. "To apologize? To explain? To somehow make him understand why you left?" "Peter, there is no explanation that makes it okay. No apology that fixes 21 years of absence. You know that, right?" "Of course I know that." Peter shouted. "I know I'm irredeemable. I know nothing I say or do will ever be enough. I know that the best thing I ever did was leave because look at him, Angela. Look at what you built without me. Elijah is brilliant and kind and successful and whole, and none of that would exist if I'd stayed and dragged you both down with my weakness and fear and complete inability to be anything other than a selfish coward." He was fully crying now, ugly sobs that shook his whole body, and he didn't care. Let her see it. Let her witness the complete collapse of the man who'd once thought himself worthy of her love. "So yes," he continued, his voice raw, "I'm drinking bourbon in a windowless office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night because it's the only thing that makes the pain stop for a few hours. Because every other coping mechanism I've tried has failed. Because I don't know how to live with the weight of what I did and who I am and everything I'll never be able to fix." Angela was very still, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, "You think leaving was the best thing you ever did?" "Look at the evidence," Peter said bitterly. "You built an empire, raised an incredible son, became someone who changes lives and shapes industries. Would any of that have happened if you'd been tied to a bartender with delusions of grandeur? If you'd spent your 20s scraping by instead of pursuing your dreams? If you'd had to support my failures instead of building your own success? You don't get to rewrite history to make yourself the martyr," Angela said, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "You didn't leave for my benefit. You left because you were scared and selfish, and Meryl offered you an easier path. Don't you dare try to spin your cowardice into some noble sacrifice. I'm not. Peter insisted. I'm saying that your success, Elijah's success, happened because I left. That's not nobility. That's just the one accidental good thing that came from my terrible choice. The only piece of this whole mess that isn't completely horrible. Angela moved closer, and Peter could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he didn't recognize. Everything about her was different from the nursing student he'd known. Everything except her eyes, which still held the capacity to see straight through him. You want to know what I think? Angela said quietly. I think you're drunk and maudlin and looking for absolution in the bottom of a bourbon bottle. I think you're telling yourself that your absence was somehow beneficial because it's easier than accepting that you simply failed. That you made a choice and it was the wrong choice and there's no redemption arc that makes it okay. She sat down in the chair Elijah had occupied 3 weeks ago, and the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. But here's the truth, Peter. The complicated, messy truth. I hate you for leaving. I will probably always hate you for that. But... She paused, seeming to struggle with what came next. But I also don't know who I would be if you'd stayed. Maybe I would have built Phoenix Global anyway. Maybe I would have found that drive and hunger and determination. Or maybe I would have settled. Maybe I would have been happy being a nurse married to a bartender, raising our son in a small apartment, never knowing I had the capacity to build an empire. She met his eyes. I'll never know. And that's what I resent most. Not what you did, but what you stole, the choice. The chance to find out who I could have been with you instead of in spite of you. Peter sat back down, the bourbon making his head swim. You became someone extraordinary. I know, Angela said. But I also became someone hard. Someone who trusts power more than people. Someone who raised her son to believe his father was dead rather than risk being vulnerable enough to tell the truth. You think your leaving was good for us? Look at what it cost, Peter. Look at what we both became. The silence between them was heavy with 21 years of pain and resentment and a connection that had never fully severed despite everything. Elijah won't talk to me, Angela said finally, her voice small in a way Peter had never heard. He's moving to San Francisco and he's barely speaking to me and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to be the mother he needs when all I know how to be is the woman who controls everything. Peter looked at her, really looked, and saw past the designer clothes and the billions in the bank and the reputation that could destroy empires. He saw the girl who used to study by lamplight and dream about opening a clinic in Roxbury and believed love could conquer logistics. I don't have answers, Peter said. I'm literally the last person who should give anyone advice about parenting or relationships or anything that requires not being a complete failure. But if you want my completely unqualified opinion. I'm listening, Angela said. Let him go, Peter said. Not forever. But let him have San Francisco. Let him build a life that isn't defined by your pain or my abandonment or 21 years of lies. Let him be angry and distant and process this without you trying to manage it. And trust that the foundation you built, those 21 years of love and sacrifice and showing up even when it was hard, that's stronger than a few weeks of anger. Angela's eyes filled with tears. What if it's not? What if I've lost him? You haven't, Peter said with more certainty than he felt about anything else in his life. I saw the way he talks about you. Even when he was furious with me, every other sentence was about what you taught him, what you showed him, how you raised him. You're woven into every good thing about him. A few weeks of distance won't erase 21 years of being his entire world. A tear slid down Angela's cheek. How do you know that? Because I've had 21 years of distance, Peter said quietly, and I'm still his father. Biology doesn't fade. And love, real love, the kind you gave him every single day, that's permanent. Even when it's complicated. Even when it's angry. Even when it's painful. Angela wiped her face with the back of her hand, a gesture so unguarded it made her look young again. You're drunk. Extremely, Peter agreed. But I'm not wrong. She stood, moved to his desk, and picked up the bourbon bottle. Examined the label. Maker's mark. At least you have decent taste in whiskey. She poured a measure into his empty coffee mug, then looked around. You don't have a second cup? I don't usually entertain in my luxurious accommodations, Peter said dryly. Angela took a sip straight from the bottle, grimaced, then sat back down. God, I haven't drunk bourbon since college. It's terrible. It grows on you, Peter said. They sat in the windowless office, the woman who'd built an empire and the man who'd lost everything, passing a bottle of bourbon back and forth and letting silence fill the spaces between them. I got a letter from Merrill, Angela said finally. Her estate attorney delivered it weeks ago. Did you know she orchestrated this entire thing? The foundation funding, the provisions in her will, everything designed to ensure you'd eventually end up working for me. Peter closed his eyes. I figured. That sounds like Merrill. Always 3 moves ahead. Always playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. She said she admired me, Angela continued, taking another sip from the bottle. Said I was everything she could have been if she'd had to fight for it instead of inheriting it. I don't know how to feel about that. Pride? Anger? Both. Both is allowed, Peter said. Most emotions are more complicated than we pretend. Angela studied him. You've changed. The Peter I knew 21 years ago wouldn't have said something like that. He would have given me some philosophy major bullshit about Kierkegaard and emotional authenticity. The Peter you knew 21 years ago was an idiot, Peter said. He thought he was deep because he could quote dead philosophers, but he had no actual wisdom. No understanding of what mattered. He mistook charm for character and ambition for purpose. Angela took another sip of bourbon, wincing again. And now I'm just a different kind of idiot, Peter said. One who understands exactly how badly he failed, but has no idea how to do better. Self-awareness without the capacity for change is just sophisticated suffering. Angela laughed, actually laughed, a sound Peter hadn't heard from her in 2 decades. That's the most honest thing you've said since I walked in here. They fell into silence again, but it was different now. Less combative. More like 2 people who'd survived the same war comparing scars. Can I ask you something? Peter said. And will you give me an honest answer? Depends on the question. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed? Not the fantasy version where everything works out. The real version. The one where we're struggling to make rent, and I'm resentful about giving up my dreams, and you're exhausted from nursing school and a baby, and we're fighting in that cramped studio apartment about whose turn it is to buy diapers. Angela was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the bourbon bottle. Every single day for the first 5 years. Then occasionally for the next 10. Then rarely after that. Now. She met his eyes. Now I wonder what Elijah would have been like with a father. Not you specifically, just the concept. Someone to teach him things I couldn't. Someone to show him that men can be present and engaged and trustworthy. I gave him everything I had, Peter, but I couldn't give him that. I couldn't model what a healthy relationship looks like because I spent 21 years convinced they didn't exist. He seems to have turned out okay despite that, Peter offered. He did, Angela agreed. But he's also 21 and has never had a serious relationship. He dates casually but never lets anyone close. His therapist, yes, I pay for therapy, don't look at me like that. His therapist says he has attachment issues. Difficulty trusting people. Fear of abandonment. She paused. I wonder how much of that is my fault versus yours. Whether the absence of a father did more damage than my presence as a mother could heal. Peter felt the words like a punch to the gut. I never thought about that. About the long-term psychological impact. I just thought, if you raised him with enough love, it would be enough. Love is never enough on its own, Angela said. It's necessary but not sufficient. You need stability and consistency and modeling and 1,000 other things. I did my best. But my best was still a single mother working 80-hour weeks and struggling with her own trauma. There were cracks, Peter. Places where I failed him just like you did, just in different ways. You didn't fail him, Peter said firmly. Angela, look at him. He's extraordinary. He's also hurting, Angela countered. And angry. And confused about his own identity because the foundational story of his life turned out to be a lie. That's on both of us. You for leaving, me for lying. We both damaged him. We just did it differently. Peter stood abruptly, the bourbon making him unsteady. He moved to the wall, leaning against it, staring at nothing. What do we do? How do we fix this? I don't know if we can, Angela said. I've been asking myself the same question for 3 weeks. And the only answer I keep coming back to is, we give him space. We let him go to San Francisco. We let him build a life that isn't defined by our mistakes. And we hope that eventually, when he's ready, he'll let us back in. That's not a plan, Peter said. That's just waiting and hoping. Sometimes that's all you can do, Angela said. She stood, moved to where he was leaning, and stood beside him. 2 people propping up the same wall, staring at the same blank space. You want to know what I learned building Phoenix Global? You can't force outcomes. You can create conditions for success, you can remove obstacles, you can position pieces strategically. But at the end of the day, some things are outside your control. And the harder you try to control them, the more they slip away. That's terrifying, Peter said. It is, Angela agreed. But it's also freeing. Once you accept that you can't control everything, you can stop exhausting yourself trying. You can focus on the things you can influence and let go of the rest. Peter turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw something he'd missed before. Beneath the CEO polish and the billionaire confidence was a woman who was just as scared as he was. Just as uncertain. Just as desperate to fix something that might be unfixable. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it. For leaving. For being too weak to stay. For choosing Meryl's money over your love. For missing 21 years of Elijah's life. For being the reason you built walls so high that you forgot how to let people in. For every single choice I made that hurt you. Angela's eyes filled with tears. I know you are. But Peter, sorry doesn't change anything. It doesn't give me back those years. It doesn't give Elijah the father he deserved. It doesn't undo the person I became because of what you did. I know, Peter said. But I needed to say it anyway. Not for me. For you. Because you deserved to hear it 21 years ago, and I was too much of a coward to say it then. Angela wiped her face, smearing mascara she rarely wore outside the office. You know what the worst part is? I don't even hate you anymore. I want to. God, I want to hate you so badly because hate is clean and simple and gives you someone to blame. But standing here, looking at you, this broken, humble version of the man who left me, I just feel sad. For all of us. For what we could have been and what we became instead. Is that progress? Peter asked. Going from hate to sadness? I don't know, Angela admitted. Maybe it's just exhaustion. Maybe I'm too tired to sustain that level of anger anymore. Or maybe... She paused, struggling with the words. Maybe Meryl was right. Maybe the best revenge isn't destroying you. Maybe it's getting to a place where you don't matter enough to destroy. The words should have hurt, but instead they felt like absolution. I think that's the healthiest thing I've heard you say. Angela laughed again, that same surprised sound. We're both drunk. This conversation is going to seem incredibly embarrassing tomorrow. Probably, Peter agreed. But at least it's honest. I don't think we've been honest with each other since that night I saw the pregnancy test. Angela moved away from the wall, back toward his desk where the bourbon sat. She picked up the bottle, examined it, then set it down decisively. We should stop drinking. This is a bad idea. Agreed, Peter said, but neither of them moved. Angela's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, and her expression shifted, surprise, then something softer. It's Elijah, she said. He texted. Peter's heart stopped. What does it say? Angela read aloud, her voice catching, Mom, I'm sorry for being distant. I'm still processing everything, but I don't want to leave for SF with things broken between us. Can we have breakfast tomorrow? Just us. I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up at Peter, her eyes bright with hope and fear. "What do you think he wants to talk about?" "I don't know," Peter said. "But Angela? Whatever it is, you need to listen. Really listen. Not plan your response while he's talking. Not try to manage the conversation or protect him from uncomfortable truths. Just listen." Angela nodded, already typing a response. "You're right. I know you're right." She hit send, then looked at Peter. "What if he asks about you? What if he wants to know if you and I have talked?" "Tell him the truth," Peter said. "That you found me drunk in my office and we had a painfully honest conversation about all the ways we've both failed him. Don't protect me, Angela. I don't deserve protection." "Neither do I," Angela said quietly. "But I'm going to ask for something anyway. Something that's probably unfair and definitely selfish." "What?" She met his eyes, and Peter saw vulnerability there that he'd never seen even when they were young and in love. "I need you to be okay. Not for me, for Elijah. Because if you fall apart, if you spiral, if something happens to you, that becomes another thing he has to carry. Another failure he'll blame himself for. So whatever you're doing here," she gestured at the bourbon, the windowless office, the visible signs of his deterioration, "you need to stop. You need to get help. You need to be stable and present and alive so that if Elijah decides he wants to know you, you're actually worth knowing." Peter felt the weight of what she was asking. It would be so much easier to keep spiraling, to drink himself numb, to let the guilt and shame and regret consume him until there was nothing left. But she was right. His self-destruction wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. "Okay," he said. "I'll get help. Therapy. AA if I need it. Whatever it takes to be stable. Present. Not this." He gestured at himself, the rumpled suit, the bourbon breath, the red-rimmed eyes. Angela nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Peter said. "This is literally the bare minimum of being a semi-functional human being. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm just trying to stop actively making things worse." Angela's phone buzzed again. Another text from Elijah. "I love you, Mom. Even when I'm angry. Even when things are complicated. That doesn't change." Angela's composure finally broke completely. She sat down hard in Peter's chair and sobbed, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and wounded. Peter stood awkwardly, unsure if he should comfort her or give her space, and finally settled on kneeling beside the chair and just being present while she fell apart. "He still loves me," Angela said through tears. "After everything. After lying to him his whole life. He still loves me." "Of course he does," Peter said gently. "Angela, you're his entire world. One revelation doesn't erase 21 years of showing up. Of loving him unconditionally. Of sacrificing everything to give him a good life. He's angry and hurt, but love isn't that fragile." Angela looked at him, her face blotchy and mascara-streaked and more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. "How do you know that?" "You've never," she stopped, seeming to realize how cruel the observation would be. "I've never been loved like that," Peter finished for her. "You're right. My parents were good people, but emotionally distant. Meryl loved my potential, not me. And I destroyed the one real love I had before I understood what it was worth. So no, I've never experienced what you and Elijah have. But I can recognize it. I can see that what you built with him is real and strong and worth fighting for." Angela reached out and took his hand, the first voluntary physical contact they'd had in 21 years. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of tomorrow. Of San Francisco. Of losing him. Of failing at the only thing that really matters." "I know," Peter said. "But you're going to show up anyway. You're going to have breakfast. You're going to listen. You're going to be honest. And whatever happens, you're going to love him through it. That's all any parent can do." They sat like that for a moment, Two people who'd loved each other a lifetime ago, connected now only by the child they'd created and the mutual wreckage of their choices. Finally, Angela pulled her hand back, wiping her face with tissues from Peter's desk drawer. I need to go. Need to sleep before breakfast. Need to be. She trailed off. Human. Peter offered. Vulnerable. Honest. All of the above, Angela agreed. She stood, gathering her coat and purse. At the door, she paused. Peter, get some sleep. And tomorrow, call a therapist. Not because I'm asking. Because you need to. I will, Peter promised. After she left, Peter sat in his office surrounded by the evidence of his breakdown, the bourbon, the tear-stained coffee mug, the suffocating silence. He pulled out his phone and searched for therapists in Manhattan who specialized in addiction and family trauma. He made an appointment for Monday. Then he called a car service, went home to his studio apartment in Queens, and lay awake until dawn thinking about second chances and whether some failures were too profound to ever truly repair. Balthazar Restaurant, Soho, 9 a.m. Saturday. Angela arrived 15 minutes early, ordered coffee she wouldn't drink, and tried not to rehearse what she'd say. Just listen, Peter's voice echoed in her head. Don't manage. Just listen. Elijah arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt that made him look younger than 21. He hugged her, brief but genuine, and sat down across from her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thanks for meeting me, he said. Always, Angela replied. Elijah, you never have to thank me for making time for you. You're my priority. Always. Elijah nodded, ordered coffee from the server, and then sat with his hands folded on the table, clearly gathering his thoughts. Angela waited, her heart hammering, every instinct screaming at her to fill the silence with reassurances and explanations. But she waited. I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks, Elijah finally said. About you. About Peter. About who I am and where I come from and what it all means. And I realized something. He met her eyes, and Angela saw Peter in the set of his jaw, herself in the determination in his gaze. I've been angry at both of you for lying to me. For making choices about my life without my input. And that's valid, I'm allowed to be angry. But I've also been unfair. Because I've been acting like I'm the only victim in this story. Like you and Peter made choices in a vacuum that only affected me. Angela started to speak, but Elijah held up a hand. Please, let me finish. This is hard enough. She nodded, closing her mouth. The truth is, you were 21 when you got pregnant. 21. The same age I am now. And I look at my life, at how unprepared I'd be to raise a child, how scared I'd be, how much I'd have to sacrifice, and I can't imagine doing what you did. You finished nursing school 8 months pregnant. You worked night shifts with a newborn. You built a career and a business while being a single parent. And you did it all while dealing with the trauma of being abandoned by someone you loved. His voice cracked slightly. That's not weakness, Mom. That's not failure. That's extraordinary. And I've been so focused on the lie you told about Dad that I forgot to acknowledge the truth of everything else. The thousands of times you showed up. The sacrifices you made. The unconditional love you gave me every single day. Tears were streaming down Angela's face now, but she didn't wipe them away. I'm still hurt, Elijah continued. I'm still processing. And I still think you should have told me the truth earlier. But I also understand why you didn't. You were protecting me. Maybe not in the way I needed, but in the way you knew how. And that matters. He reached across the table and took her hand. I love you, Mom. Even when I'm angry. Even when things are complicated. That's what I wanted you to know before I leave for San Francisco. That my love isn't conditional on you being perfect. It's just love. Angela couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. She squeezed his hand and let herself cry in the middle of a Soho restaurant while other diners pretended not to notice. There's something else, Elijah said after giving her a moment to compose herself. Something I need to tell you, and you're not going to like it. Angela's stomach clenched. Okay. I want to meet with Peter. Have an actual conversation. Not an ambush in his office, but a real sit-down where we both go in knowing what it is. Elijah spoke quickly, like he was afraid she'd interrupt. I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for me. Because I need to look him in the eye and ask him questions and get answers. Real answers. Not the sanitized version you've given me or the bitter version I've imagined. I need to understand who he is now, not just who he was 21 years ago. Every protective instinct Angela had screamed at her to say no. To tell Elijah that Peter didn't deserve this opportunity. That she'd forbidden contact for good reason. That opening this door could lead to more pain, more disappointment, more wounds that might never heal. But she'd promised honesty. She'd promised to let Elijah make his own choices. So instead of all the things she wanted to say, Angela took a deep breath and asked, "What do you need from me?" Elijah looked surprised, like he'd been bracing for a fight. I need you to be okay with this. Or if you can't be okay with it, at least don't stand in the way. I know you have that non-contact agreement. I know you could enforce it, make it legally impossible for Peter to meet with me. But I'm asking you, as your son, as an adult making my own choices, please don't. Angela was quiet for a long moment, warring with herself. Finally, she said, I won't stop you. If this is what you need, I won't interfere. But Elijah, I need you to understand something. What? Peter is not the hero of some redemption story. He's a man who made terrible choices and is living with the consequences. He can be charming, he was always charming, but charm isn't character. He can apologize beautifully, express remorse, say all the right things. But words are easy. It's actions over time that matter. And his actions, for 21 years, were absence. She squeezed his hand. I'm not saying this to poison you against him. I'm saying it because I love you and I don't want you to get hurt worse than you already have been. If you meet with him, go in with your eyes open. Don't expect him to fill some father-shaped hole in your life. He's just a man. A flawed, damaged man who gave up the right to be your father a long time ago. I know, Mom, Elijah said gently. I'm not looking for a dad. I'm looking for answers. There's a difference. Angela nodded, swallowing past the lump in her throat. Okay. Then yes. I'll revoke the non-contact clause. You can meet with him. But on one condition. What? Afterward, no matter what happens, you talk to me. You tell me how you're feeling, what you're thinking. You don't shut me out. Because Elijah, I can handle you being angry with me. I can handle you needing space. But I can't handle silence. I can't handle not knowing if you're okay. Deal, Elijah said. I promise. No silence. The server arrived with their food, omelets and toast that neither of them had much appetite for, and they spent the rest of breakfast talking about San Francisco, about the biotech integration project, about anything other than the emotional minefield they just navigated. When they parted on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, Elijah hugged Angela tight and whispered, "Thank you for letting me do this my way." "Thank you for still loving me even when I get it wrong," Angela whispered back. She watched him walk away toward the subway, this young man who was her entire heart walking around outside her body, and sent up a silent prayer to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. Please don't let this destroy him. Then she pulled out her phone and texted Peter, "Elijah wants to meet with you. I'm revoking the non-contact clause. But Peter, if you hurt him worse than you already have, there is no place on earth you'll be able to hide from me." The response came within seconds. I understand. Thank you for trusting me with this. I won't waste it. Angela stared at the message, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake, and decided it didn't matter. This was Elijah's choice. All she could do was be there to catch him if he fell. Central Park, the Bethesda Fountain 2 days later. Peter arrived 20 minutes early, wearing the best suit he still owned, a charcoal Tom Ford he'd bought during his marriage to Meryl, tailored and pressed and completely at odds with his current station in life. He'd gotten a haircut. Shaved carefully. Tried to look like someone worth knowing instead of someone slowly drowning in regret. His hands shook as he waited, watching tourists throw coins in the fountain and make wishes. What would he wish for if he believed in such things? More time? A chance to redo the past? The capacity to be worthy of this opportunity? He saw Elijah approaching from across the plaza, and his heart stopped. His son walked with confidence, wearing dark jeans and a leather jacket, looking every inch the successful young executive he was. But there was something in his expression, a wariness, a guard, that reminded Peter painfully of Angela. "Peter," Elijah said, stopping a few feet away. "Not Dad. Not Mr. Langston. Just Peter." "Elijah," Peter replied, his voice rough. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "I'm not doing this for you," Elijah said bluntly. "I'm doing it for me. I have questions. You're going to answer them honestly. And then I'll decide what, if anything, happens next. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Peter said. "Ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth, even when it makes me look worse than I already do." Elijah nodded and started walking along the path that circled the fountain. Peter fell into step beside him, maintaining careful distance. "Why did you leave?" Elijah asked. "And I don't want the sanitized version. I want the real reason. The ugly truth." Peter had known this question was coming, had rehearsed a dozen different answers. But standing here beside his son, he found himself falling back on the simplest truth. "I was terrified," Peter said. "Your mother showed me that pregnancy test, and all I could see was my future collapsing. I was 26, tending bar, drowning in student debt, watching rich people order expensive drinks and knowing I'd never be one of them. And then suddenly there was going to be a baby, diapers and formula and daycare and a lifetime of never having enough money, never getting ahead, never being more than what I was." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "And then Merrill offered me an escape. Money. Status. A penthouse and a closet full of expensive suits and the chance to be someone important instead of someone struggling. It was the easy path. The coward's path. But I took it anyway because I wanted those things more than I wanted to be your father." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Did you ever think about me? After you left?" "Every day," Peter said. "In the beginning, I told myself you and your mother were better off without me. That I would have just dragged you down. But in the dark hours, 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come and guilt was eating me alive, I'd wonder what you looked like. Whether you had my eyes or your mother's smile. Whether you were happy. Whether Angela told you about me or erased me completely." "She told me you were dead," Elijah said. "Killed in a car accident before I was born. She made you a hero so I wouldn't have to know I was unwanted." The word unwanted hit Peter like a physical blow. "You were never unwanted, Elijah. I was just too weak and selfish to want you more than I wanted money and status. That's not the same thing. That's my failure, not your inadequacy." They walked in silence for a moment, the November air crisp and cold around them. "What was your marriage to Merrill like?" Elijah asked. Peter laughed bitterly. "Transactional. I was her project, her trophy, her entertainment. She dressed me, controlled my schedule, decided who I could befriend and what events I could attend. And I let her because that was the price of the life I wanted. When I finally tried to assert some independence, made the spectacularly stupid decision to sleep with her assistant, she divorced me and cut me off completely. Left me with almost nothing and a reputation as the gold digger who got exactly what he deserved." "Did you love her?" "No," Peter said honestly. "I loved what she could give me. I was grateful to her. Sometimes I even liked her. But love? No. I only ever loved one woman, and I destroyed that relationship before it had a chance to become what it could have been." Elijah glanced at him sharply. "You still love my mother?" Peter was quiet for a long moment. "I love who she was. The nursing student with big dreams and boundless compassion. The woman who made a cramped studio apartment feel like home. But the woman she became, the CEO, the billionaire, the force of nature who built Phoenix Global, I don't know her well enough to love her. I admire her. I'm in awe of her. I'm grateful she became someone so strong that my absence couldn't break her. But love? That requires knowing someone. And I gave up the right to know your mother 21 years ago." They completed their circle around the fountain and stopped back where they'd started. Elijah turned to face Peter directly. "I'm going to San Francisco tomorrow," he said. "I'll be gone for at least a year, maybe longer. And I don't know what happens when I get back. I don't know if I'll want a relationship with you or if this conversation will be enough to give me the closure I need. I don't have answers yet." "That's fair," Peter said. "You don't owe me anything, Elijah. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not even this conversation. Whatever you decide, I'll accept it. But I need you to know something," Elijah continued. "I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to be the relationship that gives your life meaning or the redemption that makes your past choices okay. You need to figure out how to be a person worth knowing independent of whether I decide to know you. Because if you're only getting your life together in hopes of a relationship with me, that's just another form of selfishness." The observation was devastating in its accuracy. "You're right. And for what it's worth, I started therapy this week. Not for you, though you're part of it, but because I need to figure out how to live with myself. How to be someone I can respect even if no one else ever does." Elijah studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something Peter didn't expect. He pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and held it out. "This is my number. I'm giving it to you not as a promise, but as a possibility. You can text me occasionally, and I mean occasionally, like once every few weeks, not every day. Tell me how therapy's going. Tell me if you accomplish something worth sharing. Show me that you're actually doing the work to become someone different." Peter took the phone with shaking hands and entered his number. "I will. I promise." "Don't promise," Elijah said, taking his phone back. "Just do it. Because I've had enough broken promises from you to last a lifetime." He zipped up his jacket, preparing to leave. "One more thing. My mom loves you. She'd never admit it, probably doesn't even admit it to herself, but I see it. In the way she talks about you even when she's angry. In the fact that she hired you instead of destroying you. In the fact that she's letting us have this conversation even though it terrifies her." Peter's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve her love." "No," Elijah agreed. "You don't. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is what you do with it. Whether you become someone worthy of it or keep being the person who wastes it." With that, Elijah walked away, leaving Peter standing by the fountain where he'd stood with Angela 22 years ago and made promises he'd broken before they'd even fully formed. But this time, Peter didn't run. He stood there and watched his son disappear into the crowd, and instead of drowning in regret, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, the faint, fragile stirring of hope. Phoenix Global Holdings, Angela's office that evening. Angela was working late, as usual, when her office door opened without knocking. She looked up, ready to scold Marcus for the intrusion, and froze. Elijah stood in her doorway, still wearing his leather jacket, his hair windblown from the walk over. "Hi, Mom," he said. Angela stood slowly, her heart in her throat. "Hi, sweetheart. I thought you'd be packing for tomorrow." "I am. I will. But I needed to see you first." He crossed the office and hugged her, really hugged her, the kind of embrace that said everything words couldn't. "I met with Peter," he said into her shoulder. "I know," Angela replied, holding him tight. "How are you?" Confused. Sad. Angry. Relieved. All of it. He pulled back, looking at her face. "But I'm okay, Mom. I got the answers I needed. Not the ones I wanted, necessarily, but the ones I needed." Angela cupped his face in her hands, seeing the boy he'd been and the man he was becoming all at once. "And what did you learn?" "That he's broken. That he knows he's broken. That he's trying to fix himself even though it might be too late." Elijah paused. "And that you're the strongest person I've ever known. That you built an empire and raised me and survived being abandoned, and you did it all while still being capable of love even when it would have been easier to just be hard. If there's one person in your life you need to have an honest conversation with, no matter how hard, who is it, and what would you say? Drop your thoughts below." Angela's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't always capable of love. I was hard for a very long time. I'm still hard in a lot of ways. But not with me, Elijah said. Never with me. And that's what matters. You gave me everything you had, Mom. Everything you were. And I'm sorry it took me 3 weeks to remember that. They stood in her office as the sun set over Manhattan, the city's lights beginning to flicker on like stars in reverse, and Angela felt something shift inside her. Not healing exactly. Wounds this deep didn't heal overnight, but perhaps the beginning of it. The possibility that time and honesty and love might eventually transform pain into something bearable. I gave Peter my number, Elijah said. Told him he could text occasionally. Show me he's actually doing the work to change. I don't know if anything will come of it, but I needed to leave that door open. For me, not for him. Angela's first instinct was to protest, to warn him, to protect him from potential disappointment. But she swallowed those words and said instead, "That's very generous of you." "It's self-interested," Elijah corrected. "I don't want to spend my life wondering what if. I'd rather give him a chance to prove he's different and be disappointed than never know. At least disappointment gives you data. Wondering just gives you anxiety." Angela laughed, despite herself. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Elijah said, kissing her forehead. "Now come on. Help me pack. You can give me motherly advice about San Francisco and tell me embarrassing stories about my childhood, and we can pretend that tomorrow you're not going to cry at the airport like I'm leaving forever." "I won't cry," Angela protested. "Mom, you cried at my kindergarten graduation. You're definitely crying tomorrow." "That was different. You sang a song. It was adorable." They left the office together, Angela's arm around her son's shoulders, and for the first time in 3 weeks, the knot in her chest loosened slightly. Things weren't fixed, weren't perfect, but they were moving in the right direction, and sometimes that was enough. 6 months later, San Francisco. Peter sat in Dr. Morrison's office, his therapist, a woman in her 60s who took exactly 0 of his bullshit, and showed her his phone. "I've texted Elijah 6 times in 6 months," he said. "Quick updates. Nothing demanding. Just proof of life and progress. He's responded to 4 of them. Short responses, but responses." Dr. Morrison examined the thread. Peter's texts were simple. Started volunteering at a youth mentorship program in Queens. Showing up weekly. Feels good to be useful. 3 months sober from alcohol. 1 day at a time. Got promoted at Phoenix Global. Still low level, but it's progress. Actually earned it this time. Read a book about fatherhood and attachment. Wish I'd read it 21 years ago, but better late than never. Elijah's responses were equally brief. "That's great. Keep it up. Proud of you. Progress is progress. It's never too late to learn." "How do you feel about his responses?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Grateful," Peter said honestly. "I'm not entitled to anything from him. Every response is a gift. Every proud of you is more than I deserve." "We've talked about this," Dr. Morrison said gently. "You need to move past deserving and not deserving. That framework keeps you stuck in shame instead of moving toward growth. The question isn't what you deserve, it's who you're becoming." Peter nodded, the lesson one he'd heard dozens of times but was only beginning to internalize. "You're right. I'm working on it." "And Angela?" Dr. Morrison prompted. "You mentioned last session that you'd run into her at the building." Peter's chest tightened at the memory. "Yeah. 2 weeks ago. We ended up in the same elevator. It was awkward, but also not terrible. We talked about Elijah. She told me he's thriving in San Francisco, leading a major project. She seemed proud." "Did you talk about anything else?" "I thanked her," Peter said quietly, "for letting Elijah give me a chance. For not destroying me when she had every right to. For being strong enough to build something beautiful out of the worst thing I ever did to anyone." "And what did she say?" "She said, 'Don't waste it, Peter. Don't waste any of this. He paused. Then the elevator reached her floor and she left. But before the doors closed, she looked back at me and said, "I'm glad you're getting help. You look better." It was the kindest thing she said to me in 21 years. Dr. Morrison smiled. "That sounds like progress." "It is," Peter agreed. "Small progress. Glacial progress. But progress nonetheless." His phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. "Hey, I'm coming to New York next month for a conference. Would you want to grab coffee? No pressure if you're not ready." Peter's hands shook as he showed the message to Dr. Morrison. "What do I say?" "What do you want to say?" "Yes. Absolutely yes. I'd walk through fire for the chance to have coffee with him." "Then say that," Dr. Morrison said simply, "but maybe less dramatically." Peter typed, "I'd like that very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Just let me know when and where." The response came quickly, "Cool. I'll send details when I know my schedule." "And Peter?" "Mom told me about the mentorship program. That's really good work you're doing." Peter felt tears prick his eyes. "He's proud of me. Not because I'm his father, I haven't earned that, but because I'm doing something worthwhile. Something that helps people." "How does that feel?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Terrifying," Peter admitted. "Because now I have something to lose again. For the first time in years, I care about being better. I care about whether I show up. I care about being someone worth knowing. And caring means I can fail. Means I can disappoint him again." "Yes," Dr. Morrison said. "It does. But it also means you're alive again. Really alive. Not just existing and avoiding pain, but actually engaged with life and its possibilities. That's worth the risk, Peter." Peter looked at his phone, at the text thread with his son, at the fragile bridge they were building one careful message at a time. "Yeah, it is." Phoenix Global Holdings. Angela's office, same day. Angela was in a video conference with her Tokyo office when Marcus knocked and entered, holding his phone with an expression she couldn't quite read. She muted her microphone. "This better be important." "Elijah just texted me," Marcus said. "Wanted me to tell you that he's meeting Peter for coffee when he's in New York next month. He figured you'd want to know before you heard it from someone else." Angela felt her stomach drop. She'd known this was coming, had given her blessing even, but the reality of it still hit like a punch. "Thank you for telling me," she managed. "I'm fine. It's fine." Marcus gave her a look that said he didn't believe her for a second. "You want me to clear your schedule that day? In case you need space to process?" "No," Angela said firmly. "I want you to book me solid. Meetings, calls, anything to keep me busy. I'm not going to sit around anxiously waiting for updates. I'm going to trust my son to handle his own relationship with his father." "You sure about that?" Marcus asked gently. "No," Angela admitted. "But I'm going to do it anyway. That's what trust looks like when it's hard." After Marcus left, Angela unmuted her microphone and returned to the conference call, forcing herself to focus on market analysis and acquisition strategies instead of the coffee meeting that wouldn't happen for weeks but was already consuming her thoughts. Later that evening, alone in her penthouse, Angela poured herself a glass of wine and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Her phone sat on the counter, silent but screaming with all the texts she wanted to send Elijah. "Are you sure about this? What if he disappoints you? What if he hurts you? What if he's still the same selfish man he was 21 years ago?" But she didn't send any of them. Instead, she texted, "Marcus told me. I think it's good that you're giving him a chance. Love you. Always." Elijah's response came immediately, "Love you too, Mom. Thank you for being okay with this." Angela smiled despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. Her son was in San Francisco, building a career and a life. Peter was in therapy, apparently doing real work to change. And she was here, learning to let go of control and trust that the foundations she'd built were strong enough to weather whatever came next. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she'd walked into that Apex Tower conference room 6 months ago. It was messier, more complicated, full of uncertainty and risk. But it was also real, honest, human. And maybe that was better than any fantasy revenge could ever be. 1 month later, Blue Bottle Coffee, Manhattan. Peter arrived 30 minutes early, ordered a black coffee he was too nervous to drink, and sat at a corner table where he could see the door. He changed his shirt 3 times that morning, finally settling on a simple button-down and jeans, professional but not trying too hard. His therapist had coached him through this meeting. Let him lead the conversation. Answer his questions honestly. Don't push for more than he's offering. And Peter? Don't make it about your redemption. Make it about getting to know him. At exactly 2 p.m., Elijah walked through the door. He'd changed in 6 months, looked older, more confident, like San Francisco had agreed with him. He wore a tech-casual uniform of dark jeans and a quarter-zip sweater, and when he spotted Peter, he offered a small wave. Peter stood, resisting the overwhelming urge to hug him. Elijah, thanks for coming. Thanks for meeting me, Elijah said, ordering a latte before joining Peter at the table. How've you been? Better, Peter said honestly. Therapy's helping. The mentorship program is good. Work is work. But I'm stable. Present. Showing up. Mom mentioned the mentorship thing, Elijah said. Working with at-risk youth. Yeah. Kids from situations like I came from, poverty, instability, big dreams but no clear path forward. I help them with college applications, job interviews, life skills. It's not much, but it feels like actually contributing instead of just taking up space. Elijah nodded, sipping his latte. That's good. Really good. They fell into an awkward silence, 2 people who shared DNA but not history, trying to find common ground. Tell me about San Francisco, Peter said. Your mom said you're leading a major project? Elijah's face lit up. Yeah, the cancer immunotherapy integration. It's actually the company you originally invested in, the one from the Langston Enterprises portfolio. Phoenix Global spun it off to Quantum, and I've been rebuilding it from the ground up. We're in phase 2 clinical trials now. The early data is promising. That's incredible, Peter said, genuine pride in his voice. You're literally saving lives. Maybe, Elijah said modestly. If the trials pan out. If we can get FDA approval. If we can scale production. There are about 17 different ways it could still fail. But you're trying, Peter said. You're doing the hard work even though failure is possible. That takes courage. Elijah looked at him sharply. Is that what you tell the kids in your mentorship program? Yeah, Peter admitted. Among other things. I tell them that failure isn't the opposite of success, it's part of the process. That the only real failure is not trying at all. He paused. I tell them things I wish someone had told me when I was their age. Things I had to learn the hard way. Like what? Elijah asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice now, not just polite conversation. Peter thought for a moment. That money and status are empty if you get them by betraying who you are. That the easy path usually leads nowhere worth going. That the people who love you are worth more than all the penthouses and expensive suits in the world. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing the right thing even when you're terrified. He met Elijah's eyes. That being a father isn't about biology, it's about showing up every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And that I failed at that in the most profound way possible, and it's the biggest regret of my life. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Do you think about what it would have been like if you'd stayed? Every day, Peter said. I imagine teaching you to ride a bike, helping with homework, being at your soccer games, walking you through your first heartbreak. All the moments I missed because I was too much of a coward to stay. Would you have been good at it? Elijah asked. Being a dad? Peter considered lying, painting himself as someone who would have risen to the occasion. But he'd promised honesty. I don't know, he admitted. 21-year-old me? Probably not. I was selfish and weak and terrified. I would have tried, or at least I want to believe I would have tried, but I don't know if trying would have been enough. Your mom carried that entire weight for both of us, and I'm not sure I had that kind of strength in me back then. And now? Elijah pressed. If you could go back, what would you do differently? Everything, Peter said without hesitation. I'd face my fear instead of running from it. I'd choose your mother and you over Meryl's penthouse. I'd work 3 jobs if that's what it took to support our family. I'd be present for every moment, the good ones and the terrible ones, because that's what love actually means. Not the romantic fantasy version, but the real, difficult, show-up-everyday version. He leaned forward slightly. But Elijah? I can't go back. I can only move forward. And the question I ask myself every day now is, who am I becoming? Am I becoming someone worthy of the second chance you're giving me? Someone who actually contributes instead of just takes? Someone you might eventually be proud to know, even if you're never comfortable calling me Dad. Elijah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know if I'll ever call you Dad. I know, Peter said. And that's okay. I don't need a title. I just need to know that when you think about me, if you think about me, you see someone who's genuinely trying to be better. Someone who's doing the work, not just talking about it. They sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop noise, hissing espresso machines, low conversations, acoustic music, filling the space between them. I'm scared, Elijah admitted suddenly. Of letting you in. Of trusting you. Of building something with you and then having you disappear again when it gets hard or you get bored or someone offers you an easier path. That's completely fair, Peter said. I haven't earned your trust. And honestly, you'd be stupid to give it to me easily. Trust is built over time, through consistent action. So all I can promise is this, I'll show up. For coffee when you're in town. For texts every few weeks. For whatever limited relationship you're comfortable with. And I'll do it reliably, consistently, for as long as you'll let me. And if I decide that's not enough? Elijah asked. If I decide I don't want you in my life at all? The question hurt, but Peter kept his voice steady. Then I'll accept it. I'll be grateful for whatever time you gave me, and I'll respect your boundaries. Because this isn't about what I need, Elijah. It's about what you need. You get to set the terms. You get to control the pace. You get to decide if I'm worth the risk. Elijah nodded slowly, processing. Then he pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. I'm coming back to New York in 3 months. Another conference. Would you want to do this again? Hope bloomed in Peter's chest, fragile and tentative. Yes. Absolutely yes. Okay, Elijah said. Same place, same time. We'll see how it goes. He stood to leave, and Peter stood too. For a moment, they looked at each other awkwardly, and then Elijah extended his hand. Peter shook it, the gesture formal but significant. Physical contact. Acknowledgement. A bridge, however narrow, between who they were and who they might become. Thank you, Peter said. For this. For the chance. For being generous enough to even consider. Don't, Elijah interrupted gently. Don't make it bigger than it is. It's just coffee, Peter. Let's see if you can do coffee consistently before we start talking about anything more. Right. Of course. Just coffee. Elijah smiled, a small thing but genuine. See you in 3 months. Peter watched him leave, then sat back down at the table, his untouched coffee now cold. He pulled out his phone and texted Dr. Morrison, had coffee with Elijah. He wants to do it again in 3 months. I didn't screw it up. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he texted Angela, thank you for raising an extraordinary man. And thank you for letting him give me a chance I don't deserve, but will spend the rest of my life trying to earn. The response came 20 minutes later. He's extraordinary because of who he is, not because of anything we did or didn't do. But you're welcome. Don't waste this, Peter. I won't, Peter typed back. I promise. And for the first time in 21 years, when Peter made a promise, he actually believed he could keep it. 2 years later, Phoenix Global Holdings, Annual Gala. Angela stood at the edge of the ballroom in a midnight blue gown that had cost more than most people's cars, watching her company's annual charity gala unfold with the precision of a military operation. 2,000 guests, $30 million raised for educational initiatives, and coverage from every major business publication. Phoenix Global had just been named one of Fortune's most admired companies for the 3rd year running. The biotech division, the one Elijah had rebuilt, had gotten FDA approval for its cancer immunotherapy. Angela was at the peak of her power, her influence, her success. And she felt oddly hollow. "You look like you're at a funeral instead of a celebration," Marcus said, appearing at her elbow with champagne. "Just thinking," Angela said, accepting the glass. About whether any of this matters," Angela admitted. "The money, the awards, the empire. What's it all for if the person I built it for is 3,000 miles away?" "Elijah's doing important work in San Francisco," Marcus reminded her. "Work you funded. Work that wouldn't exist without Phoenix Global's investment. You should be proud." "I am proud," Angela said. "But I also miss him. Miss the days when he lived with me, when we'd have breakfast together, when I knew everything about his life. Now I get weekly phone calls and quarterly visits and updates filtered through his carefully maintained boundaries." "That's called him being an adult," Marcus said gently. "It's what you raised him to be." "I know," Angela sighed. "Doesn't make it easier." Her phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. "Hey Mom, turn around." Angela spun, her heart leaping, and saw her son standing at the ballroom entrance in a tuxedo, grinning at her surprise. She crossed the room in record time, not caring that people were staring, and hugged him tightly. "What are you doing here? You said you couldn't make it." "I lied," Elijah said, hugging her back. "Thought you could use a surprise. Plus, I have news." Angela pulled back, studying his face. "Good news." "Great news. The immunotherapy trial results came in. 73% response rate in late-stage pancreatic cancer patients. 73%, Mom. We're talking about one of the deadliest cancers, and we're getting results that could change everything." Tears filled Angela's eyes. "Elijah, that's incredible. You're saving lives. Actually saving lives." "We're saving lives," Elijah corrected. "Phoenix Global's investment made this possible. Your belief in the project when everyone else said it was too risky. This is your win too, Mom." Angela cupped his face. "No, sweetheart. This is all you. Your leadership, your vision, your refusal to give up when the data looked bad in phase 1. I'm so incredibly proud of you." "There's something else," Elijah said, and his expression shifted to something more cautious. "I brought someone with me. Someone I wanted you to meet." Angela's stomach clenched. "Peter." "No," Elijah said quickly. "Though we should talk about that later. Someone else. Someone important to me." He gestured across the ballroom, and Angela saw a young woman approaching, mid-20s, black, beautiful, wearing an elegant emerald dress and a nervous smile. "Mom, this is Zara Williams. My girlfriend." "Zara, this is my mother, Dr. Angela Bassett." Angela extended her hand, her CEO instincts kicking in even as her maternal heart was racing. "Zara, it's wonderful to meet you. Elijah's mentioned you." "Only good things, I hope," Zara said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "He said you're a pediatric oncologist at UCSF," Angela said. "That you met through the clinical trials." "Yes, ma'am. I've been consulting on the pediatric applications of the immunotherapy. Elijah's been, well, he's been amazing to work with. And then somewhere along the way, work became more than work." The way Zara looked at her son, with genuine affection and respect, made Angela's heart both soar and ache. "How long have you been together?" Angela asked. 8 months, Elijah said, taking Zara's hand. "I wanted to tell you earlier, but I wanted to be sure." Wanted to know it was real before I introduced her to the most important person in my life. Angela felt tears threatening again. I'm glad you brought her. Both of you should enjoy the gala. We'll have dinner tomorrow, the three of us, and you can tell me everything. As they walked away, Marcus reappeared. That's new. He's in love, Angela said, watching her son laugh at something Zara said. My baby is in love. And you're okay with that? I'm terrified, Angela admitted, but also happy. He's building a life, Marcus. A real, full life with work he loves and a woman who clearly adores him. That's everything I wanted for him. Even if it means letting go. Especially if it means letting go, Angela said softly. Across the ballroom, standing near the bar in a rented tuxedo that fit better than anything he'd worn in years, Peter watched the scene unfold. He'd been invited to the gala as a Phoenix Global employee. His work with the mentorship program had caught the attention of the company's charitable foundation, and he'd been asked to give a brief presentation about the initiative. It was a small role, nothing glamorous, but it was real and earned. He'd seen Elijah arrive, had watched the reunion with Angela, had seen the young woman who made his son's face light up. And standing there at the periphery of their joy, Peter felt something unexpected. Peace. He wasn't part of that circle. Might never be. But they were happy, thriving, building beautiful lives. And he'd finally done something that contributed instead of destroyed. The mentorship program had helped 43 kids in 2 years, getting them into college, into jobs, into futures they'd thought were impossible. It wasn't redemption. Wasn't enough to balance the scales. But it was something. Peter Langston. He turned to find a young woman in her early 20s, black, wearing a server's uniform. She looked vaguely familiar. I'm sorry, do I know you? Peter asked. Not exactly, she said. But you knew my mom. Keisha Davis? She worked with Dr. Bassett at Mass General 22 years ago. Peter's mind raced back. Keisha, Angela's friend from nursing school, the one who'd helped with Elijah when he was a baby. I remember Keisha, Peter said carefully. Is she here? No, she passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. The young woman's eyes were bright but not crying. But before she died, she told me something. She said if I ever met you, I should tell you that Dr. Bassett, Angela, she didn't just survive after you left. She thrived. And a lot of that was because she was too stubborn to let your abandonment define her. Peter nodded, the words landing like they were meant to. But she also told me to tell you something else, the young woman continued. She said that Angela talked about you sometimes, in those early years. And that despite everything, despite the pain and the struggle, Angela never regretted having Elijah. Never once wished she'd made a different choice. She said you gave Angela the greatest gift of her life, even if you didn't stick around to see it. Peter's eyes filled with tears. What's your name? Jasmine. Jasmine Davis. Thank you, Jasmine, for telling me that. And I'm sorry about your mother. She lived a good life, Jasmine said. Dr. Bassett paid for my college, you know. Full scholarship through the Phoenix Foundation. I'm in medical school now. Pediatrics. Following in both their footsteps. She moved back to her serving duties, leaving Peter standing alone with tears streaming down his face and something that felt almost like forgiveness settling in his chest. Peter. He turned to find Angela standing behind him, elegant and powerful and somehow softer than he'd seen her in years. Angela, he said, quickly wiping his face. I didn't mean to crash your moment with Elijah. I was just... You were invited, Angela interrupted. You're here to present the mentorship program. I saw your name on the list. Right. Yes. Small presentation. I'll stay out of your way. Angela studied him for a moment. You look good. Healthy. The therapy's working. Yeah, Peter said. 2 years now. Still going every week. Still showing up for the mentorship program. Still texting Elijah every few weeks. Still trying to be someone worth knowing. He brought his girlfriend, Angela said. Did you see? I did. She seems wonderful. He seems happy. He is, Angela confirmed. Then quieter, he's been having coffee with you. Every time he comes to New York. He told me last month that it's become something he looks forward to. Peter's heart stopped. He said that. He said you're consistent. That you show up. That you ask about his life and actually listen. That you've never pushed for more than he's comfortable giving. Angela paused. He said you're becoming someone he respects, even if the word father still doesn't quite fit. That's more than I ever hoped for, Peter said honestly. Angela looked across the ballroom at Elijah, who was introducing Zara to Marcus. I spent 21 years hating you. Building walls so high that no one could hurt me again. Using my pain as fuel to build an empire. And it worked. I became powerful and successful and untouchable. She turned back to Peter. But it also made me hard. Made me distrust love. Made me raise Elijah with a message that people leave, that you can only count on yourself, that vulnerability is weakness. And it took almost losing him to realize that the walls I built to protect myself were also keeping out the very things that make life worth living. Angela. I'm not saying I forgive you, she interrupted. I don't know if I ever will. The wound is too deep, the years too many. But I'm saying that I'm trying to let go of the hate. Because carrying it around is exhausting, and it's not serving me anymore. It's just heavy. Peter nodded, understanding that this was as close to absolution as he would ever get. Thank you for telling me that. There's something else, Angela said. The Streep Foundation, the one Merrill left to me. I'm renaming it. The Langston Bassett Foundation for Single Parents. It's going to fund education, childcare, healthcare, and entrepreneurship for single mothers and fathers trying to build better lives for their children. Peter stared at her, speechless. It's not about you, Angela clarified. It's about Elijah. About honoring the life we built together despite everything. About turning pain into purpose. But I wanted you to know because your name will be on it. And before I make it public, I needed to make sure you understand what that means. What does it mean? Peter asked. It means I'm choosing to remember that once upon a time, before you left, we created something beautiful together. And that even though you walked away, that creation, our son, grew into someone extraordinary. The foundation is about honoring that. Not erasing you from the story, but integrating you into it honestly. The good and the bad. The love and the abandonment. All of it. Peter felt tears streaming down his face again, not caring who saw. I don't deserve to have my name on something so meaningful. No, Angela agreed. You don't. But Elijah does. And his name is Langston Bassett. So the foundation will be too. She started to walk away, then paused. Your presentation is in 20 minutes. You should probably compose yourself. Can't have you crying in front of 2,000 people. Angela. Peter called after her. She turned. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know nothing I do will ever balance the scales. But I want you to know that every good thing I do, every kid I help, every mentorship session, every moment of showing up, it's because you showed me what real strength looks like. What real love looks like. You didn't just survive me leaving. You became someone who changes the world. And that's the most beautiful revenge I could ever imagine. Angela's eyes were bright with unshed tears. It stopped being about revenge a long time ago, Peter. Now it's just about building something that matters. She walked away, leaving Peter standing alone in a ballroom full of people, feeling more connected to humanity than he had in 21 years. 5 years later. The Langston Bassett Foundation annual gala was smaller than Phoenix Global's, only 500 guests instead of 2,000, but no less meaningful. The foundation had funded education for over 3,000 single parents, provided childcare subsidies for 5,000 families, and helped launch 200 businesses owned by single mothers and fathers. Angela stood at the podium in a silver gown, her hair now showing distinguished threads of gray she no longer bothered to hide, and addressed the room. 5 years ago, I renamed what was then the Streep Foundation because I wanted to honor not just my own journey, but the journey of every parent who's ever raised a child alone. Who's ever worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on? Who's ever chosen their child's future over their own comfort? She paused, finding Elijah in the crowd. He sat at a front table with Zara, who was now his wife of 6 months, her hand resting on her barely visible baby bump. My son taught me that healing isn't linear. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let pain define you. That family isn't just about biology. It's about showing up day after day, especially when it's hard. Her eyes moved to another table, where Peter sat with Marcus and several of the young people from his mentorship program. He looked older but lighter, like some burden had finally been set down. And someone else taught me, though it took me 21 years to learn it, that people can change. Not quickly. Not easily. Not without deep work and consistent action and genuine accountability. But they can change. And when they do, when they truly commit to becoming better, we have a choice. We can hold them in the past, or we can acknowledge their growth while still honoring our pain. After the speeches, after the dinner, after the presentations highlighting families whose lives had been transformed by the foundation, Angela found herself on the terrace overlooking the Hudson River. Peter approached carefully, maintaining respectful distance. Your speech was beautiful. Thank you, Angela said. How's the mentorship program? Good. We're expanding to Boston next month. Opening a second location in Roxbury, actually. Near where we used to live. Angela smiled at the irony. Full circle. Something like that. Peter paused. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother. Elijah told me last week. He seemed excited. Terrified is more like it, Angela laughed. But excited too. He and Zara are going to be wonderful parents. He learned from the best, Peter said quietly. They stood in companionable silence, watching the river flow beneath them, carrying everything, sediment and history and possibility, toward the ocean. Can I ask you something? Peter said. And you can tell me it's none of my business. Go ahead. Are you happy? Really happy? Or is it still just empire building and achievement and staying so busy you don't have to feel things? Angela considered the question honestly. A little of both. The empire building is real, it's who I am. But I've learned to feel things too. To let people in. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. I'm dating someone, actually. A professor at Columbia. It's new and terrifying and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I'm trying to believe that good things can happen without disaster following. That's wonderful, Peter said, and meant it. You deserve happiness, Angela. Real, uncomplicated happiness. So do you, Angela said. Are you happy? Peter thought about it. I'm content. I have work that matters. I have coffee with Elijah every month when he's in New York. We talk about everything now, not just safe topics. I have kids in the mentorship program who actually listen to my advice. I have therapy and AA meetings and a life that's small but mine. It's not the penthouse and the status and the empire I once thought I needed. But it's real. And that's enough. That's very zen of you, Angela said with a slight smile. 2 years of therapy and a lot of meditation, Peter admitted. Turns out confronting your demons requires actual work, not just drinking bourbon and feeling sorry for yourself. Angela laughed, a real laugh, the kind she used to give freely before pain taught her to guard everything. Can I tell you something? She said. Something I've never said out loud? Of course. When Elijah told me he wanted to name his daughter, our granddaughter, after my mother, I cried for an hour. Because it meant he understood where he came from. The struggle, the sacrifice, the women who built foundations for him to stand on. But then he said something else. She turned to look at Peter directly. He said he wanted her middle name to be Patricia, after Meryl. Peter's eyes widened. Why? Because Meryl funded my first business. Because without her strange, complicated, possibly vindictive investment, Phoenix Global might never have existed. Because even though her motives were questionable, her impact was real. Elijah said he wanted his daughter's name to honor the complicated truth that good things can come from messy origins. That we're all shaped by both the people who stay and the people who leave. Tears streamed down Peter's face. He's so much wiser than either of us. He is, Angela agreed. Mia Patricia Bassett. Due in 4 months. And he wants you to be part of her life, Peter. Not as grandfather, he's not ready for that language yet. But as someone who's present. Someone who shows up. Someone who's part of the family story, even the complicated parts. Peter couldn't speak. Could only nod as emotion overwhelmed him. So here's what I'm offering, Angela said. Not forgiveness. I still don't know if I'll ever get there. But acceptance. Acknowledgement that you're doing the work. That you've changed. That you're becoming someone worthy of knowing our grandchild. If you can accept those terms, limited, bounded, conditional, then I won't stand in the way of you being part of her life. I accept, Peter managed. Whatever terms. Whatever boundaries. I'll show up. I'll be consistent. I'll be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. Don't make promises, Angela said. Just do the work. Day after day. Year after year. Show us through action, not words. I will, Peter said. Then, correcting himself, I am. I'm already doing it. And I'll keep doing it for the rest of my life. Angela extended her hand, and Peter took it. They shook, formal, symbolic, a treaty between former enemies who become something more complicated than friends, but less fraught than adversaries. To new beginnings, Angela said. To second chances earned, Peter. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you love this story, you will surely enjoy the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.